Life is Strange Before the Storm is a bad game. I don't even have any bit here, it's just really bad. Happy Pride Month. Here's a video of me ranting about 2 lesbians for 3 hours. So, I have a confession I need to make to all of you. Remember when I said in the video on the first Life is Strange that Life is Strange 2 was the only game in this series I never played? I was going to open up this video talking about how I felt kind of neutral about this game being revealed and announced, since it was right off the heels of me playing the first game for the first time, and you guys know how I feel about that game, and how after I played it I mostly wiped it from my memory and moved on to other games that came out this year, like Breath of the Wild, which I played year-round, Sonic Mania, Metroid Samus Returns. You know, generally playing games I was infinitely more interested in. And between that and this being the year I started college, I just kind of forgot about this game. At least that's what I was going to say, but then I started playing the game for the video. I didn't recognize the opening. I didn't recognize most of episode 1. I finished the game and I didn't recognize any of it. I even went back through my PlayStation history and yeah, this game was nowhere to be found. I have definitely never played this game before. I couldn't really tell you why I swore up and down all these years that I had played it. Maybe I just watched a lot of videos on the game around the time or something. I guess that's possible since the first game was fresh on my mind. But I suppose that makes for a more interesting video now in a weird way. I don't have any attachment, nostalgia, or history with this game. That's the first time that's happened for something I'm covering on this channel. And of course, fate would have it that it's fucking Chloe Price's game that breaks that trend. Of course, that doesn't change what I said in the last video. If this game means something to you, I shouldn't be the one to take that from you or anyone else for that matter. I will say though, this game did in a very bizarre way give me a lot more appreciation for the first game here. Like, Jesus Christ, I'm so sorry. And of course, just like the first game, this was not always for the right reasons. Life is Strange 1 was a pretty big success for dontnod and Square Enix. The game won a ton of awards, people really liked the game at the time. Most importantly, it sold very, very well. Well enough that Square Enix didn't just want to make a sequel. They wanted a franchise out of this. Comics, books, apparently a TV adaptation was in the works at one point, and of course, a sequel being made at dontnod. But while they were working on that, Square still wanted to capitalize on the game's hype and success as soon as possible. Case in point, Before the Storm. This was not made by dontnod. This time we have kinda sorta newcomer Deck 9, a studio I'm sure the fanbase has very good feelings about and finds absolutely nothing wrong with them. I do say kinda sorta because the studio has actually been around since 1997, originally going by the name Idle Minds. Before this game, they were mostly known for small things. They did the HD remasters of the Ratchet & Clank games on PlayStation 3. They did that one Neopets game I know has a cult following. Me personally, I'll remember them most for Madagascar 2 on PlayStation 2.
Looks like you might get caught. Just pop behind those rocks and that log for cover. Good luck.
That's not even a joke, dude. This game slaps. Around 2016, the studio decided it would rebrand and take focus on making more story-driven games. They even made an entire toolset they called StoryForge for it. Apparently it was pretty impressive. Square Enix was so impressed in fact that they brought them on the same year to make a brand new Life is Strange game altogether, serving as a prequel to the original game and to hold over fans until dontnod's sequel the following year. Before the Storm was directed by Webb Pickersgill and Chris Floyd, with script writing being led by Zach Garris. Ashley Birch, Chloe's original voice actor, also had a hand in the script for the game during the process as well. While there wasn't any full-blown dev commentary that was made for this game like the first one, I did watch a handful of developer interviews and diaries about the game, and the sentiment early on seemed to be that Deck 9 was really impressed with what Dontnod accomplished with the first game. There was definitely pressure on them to live up to the expectations the first game set, not only making this a prequel, but putting the focus on who was arguably the first game's breakout character. This part was especially important to them too, as they considered a handful of characters to be the lead, including Rachel Amber herself. Eventually deciding on Chloe, partially because of creative decisions, and I'm sure partially to get eyes on the game in the first place. Seriously, when you think Life is Strange prequel, there's not many other characters that can fit the bill as protagonist. I mean, what were they gonna do, make fucking Luke the main character? Powers were also scrapped in the game in order for decisions in the game to have more weight to them, as well as continuity reasons. They also said they didn't want to fill Arcadia Bay with superheroes either. I wonder what these guys would have thought of double exposure. Development definitely wasn't without its hurdles. The game was announced at E3 2017 and came out 2 months later. And there wasn't really anything about this game presenting itself like, oh, it's just shadow dropping out of nowhere in 2 months. You guys get to play the game super soon. Nah, this reeked of, oh, it's out in 2 months. I'm sure that bodes well when it looks like Square is pushing the game out like that. So, like I talked about earlier, obviously, apparently I have never played this game before, and in a weird way, I am kind of looking forward to visiting it, since, I've obviously never played it before, never experienced it. I don't know about much what happens in this game. So, I think my feelings about Chloe as a character are, very clear at this point, but who knows, maybe I'll like it, maybe I'll love it, maybe it'll surprise me, or, I don't know, maybe it's gonna suck, isn't it? It's going to really suck. In fact, I'll tell you up front here, like I did with the first Life is Strange, I really don't like Before the Storm. Of course, I'll be fair to it in the moments I think are good, like I did the first game, but you all need to know this up front. This isn't only going to be a deep analysis and retrospective like the last Life is Strange video was. This is going to be a goddamn beatdown. Now, before we get into the Storm, let's talk about Before the Storm Remaster real quick and how I'm going to approach things this time compared to the first game. I played this game fully twice, once on the original game and once on Remastered. Like the first game, I did this to compare both versions as well as go back and see the different results of my choices. Not that there's much, but we'll get there. But as I'm reviewing this, I'll be discussing my thoughts on the game as a whole the best I can. So going over a combo of my first impressions and what I thought after finishing my second playthrough and mulling the game over. Let me address something real quick from the first video. When I did my initial retrospective on Life is Strange, I was completely unaware of the fact that the Remaster collection was apparently pretty broken at launch. Like, embarrassingly so. And when it came to the first game, I probably wouldn't have noticed this at all if I didn't press further, unless I kept playing the Switch version, but I think those problems are a completely separate ordeal. When I played the first remaster, all I really ran into were some audio bugs. Nothing that really ruined my experience, again, unless we're talking about the Switch version of the game. And the thing about the first remaster is that there's at least enough of an art direction change that you could justify getting this version. With that said, do not buy Before the Storm Remastered. I'm not talking about only on Switch, I mean the entire game. This game truly does not look that much different from the original, and wow guys, the bugs I ran into playing this were ridiculous. I had this fun moment in episode 1 where a character decided, fuck this picnic table in particular, and started sitting above it. There was this moment in episode 3 where I guess Rachel forgot to talk.
Whatever it takes.
Man, this girl really spitting facts out here. Models will constantly get stuck in default pose, especially in Chloe's case whenever she performs certain actions. Like, Jesus Christ, Chloe, how the fuck are you doing that? Why couldn't you do this in Life is Strange 1? Dude, Nathan would have never messed with your ass again if you did this. The final cutscene that plays at the end of each episode? Forewarning, this is not gonna be nice on the eyes. 3, 2, 1. Completely broken with a shit ton of screen tearing. And this isn't my capture card, I went back and made sure of this. There are so many little things across Remastered that add up, and what's really weird and bizarre is the original game was fairly polished, and Remastered doesn't look that much different. So what the hell happened here? I did of course try out the first episode on Switch out of morbid curiosity, since I got lucky with that copy of Arcadia Bay Collection for Switch and it had a usable code for Before the Storm. And well, okay, to be fair, this wasn't a total disaster compared to the first game's Switch port, but this is still the last version of the game you should play. Things generally look unpolished and untextured. The things that are textured are really blurry. Like, look at the pictures inside Chloe's journal. The game also had its own share of visual hiccups, like this odd texture in the sky outside Chloe's house. I'm pretty sure David's eyes were trying to come out of their sockets at one point. There's this weird warping effect going on with the character models at times. This version of the game sucks no matter what way you turn it. If you're going to play Before the Storm in any capacity, spoiler alert though, I don't think you really should, avoid the remaster this time around. Not only is it less stable, but it's really unneeded.
My first thought with Life is Strange was just how kind of lovingly crafted the world was. It just felt like it had a lot of care put into it.
The one thing that I remember taking away was the people who worked on that game loved that game. You could tell.
Dontnod had really set a high bar, and we wanted to make sure that we could hit that.
Before the Storm starts with Chloe getting her shit kicked in by a train.
I like trains.
Here is the first thing you'll immediately notice when starting Before the Storm.
I can't believe Firewalk is playing a show at the old mill. No trespassing? No way. I'm sorry, officer. It says what on the side of my RV? You gotta let me in. Check it. I'm totally legit.
Something feel off to you? Because it is. That is definitely not Ashley Birch's Chloe. We have a sort of newcomer in the role here. Chloe's motion capture actor for the first and second game, Rihanna DeVries, is now taking up the role.
I took Chloe very personally. I tried to play her as raw and as close to heart as possible. I think just the rawness of her hurt and her pain is the thing that makes her such a dynamic and lovable character.
And this is a lot to unpack, but not just for reasons involving her performance. Let's talk about this now because this is a pretty important part of Before the Storm's development. So if you didn't know, from 2016 to 2017, video game voice actors that are part of SAG-AFTRA were on strike. Essentially boiled down to safety concerns for performances that were not being met, and more importantly, voice actors receiving almost no residuals for their performances. Ashley Birch is registered with SAG, so besides the fact that she was one of hundreds of voice actors on strike, petitioning for better safety and guaranteed residuals, you can't cross a picket line. I think 99% of the time if you're part of a union you probably wouldn't anyways, and thankfully this strike eventually ended with a win for SAG. But I don't know how to tell you guys this, but unions take strikes very seriously. So seriously in fact that if Ashley, even for a second, consider crossing that picket line to come back, sorry pal, you're out of SAG. There goes what basically amounts to the biggest union in the country that would have guaranteed you benefits and protections for voice acting. So, what was Square's solution to this? Delay the game? Nope, let's just recast Chloe entirely. Look, for as much as you guys are very aware of how much I despise Chloe in the first game, Ashley's performance was like the only thing I praised when it came to her. Whether you like Chloe or not, Ashley brought this character to life in a way that only a handful of really talented performers can do. Her role and her work as Chloe was not an easy feat, is what I'm trying to say. That's not something you can replace. You can't replace that. To my knowledge, Rihanna DeVries was never part of SAG, and when she was offered the role of Chloe instead, she jumped right into playing it. Now, if you think crossing the picket line during a union strike is enough to get you kicked from SAG, what do you think that did for someone who wasn't even in it to begin with? Now, obviously, this is just my take as an outsider. I can't claim to know who Ashley is, or Rihanna for that matter, how this affected them, what was going on in their lives, or the circumstances that led to this. All I can do is give my opinion as an outsider, and yeah, this isn't a really good look. Scabbing, the act of undermining a picket line to take a job that would have gone to a striking worker, replacing them, and compromising the work being done to ensure better conditions for a striking worker. Regardless of intentions, this is exactly what happened here. Ashley couldn't return because she was striking for better work pay and conditions. Square Enix says, okay fine, you're replaceable, and they have Rihanna take the role instead. And she takes the role in a heartbeat. Again, I want to emphasize, this is just my take, and I can't speak for anyone involved, but if I was Ashley, it would be hard to not feel at least a little insulted. At the same time, Rihanna was 20 when she got this role. That's pretty young to be offered a role for such a popular breakout character. And Ashley was 24 when she played Chloe. By the time she was working on Before the Storm, she was 26. That doesn't really sound like that big of an age gap, but I mean, say as someone who's 26, That is a world of difference as far as values, as far as life goals, all of that. I guess my take ultimately boils down to this. Rihanna made some mistakes. Do I think there should be criticism for scabbing a role like this? Yeah. Do I think it means she should be completely ostracized from doing something she loves and is very clearly passionate about? No, not at all. And it seems like things worked out for her in the long run. Without going into too much detail, because, God forbid, the last thing I want to do is start a witch hunt, and for the love of God, please do not start a fucking witch hunt against Rihanna. Not that I think my channel would play any role in that potentially happening years after this game came out, but you know what I mean. She still does work in theater to this day and seems to really enjoy where she is in life, so I can respect that. She made a controversial decision, one that I will remind you only exists because there are people at a certain point in the pipeline, whether it came from Deck 9, although it doesn't really seem like that, Square Enix, wherever, who saw the demands SAG was making during the strike to not only compensate them properly, but also to address real safety concerns related to voice acting, looked at these demands and said, nah. I think that's the bigger issue rather than an actress at 20 years old given an offer they probably one way or another couldn't refuse. I don't want to get too into this because this is a Life is Strange video, but this is capitalism. The working class may fuck up from time to time, but don't forget who the real enemies are here. While I was researching this and watching dev diaries and whatnot, I did come across a Q&A with the devs that discussed this. It seems to me like something was out of their control here.
We even went to the point of considering whether we shouldn't make this game. I mean, it came
Yep.
to that point, and saying if we can't have Ashley Birch, who is obviously so iconic in this role, is it worth telling this story? But our final conclusion was fans will want to see this story, and it has a lot to, I think, to bring to the world of Life is Strange. So we didn't want these unfortunate circumstances to get in the way.
I don't know about you guys, but this reads less to me like we wanted to tell this story now, and more like a higher up or two told them, you guys have a deadline, stick to it. Ultimately, it seems as though everyone on the creative side of things was satisfied. Ashley still got to be involved without having to break her striking commitments. Rihanna got to do her first big role. Given the behind-the-scenes circumstances that were likely happening at the time because of the strike, this was probably the best outcome they could have gotten. Alright, so where were we here? Oh yeah. Rihanna is perfectly fine as Chloe. The first issue I have here is that she sounds like someone older trying to impersonate what a teenager sounds like.
Last night, seeing Firewalk live. The whole point of lowering expectations is so you won't be disappointed in me.
I'm a little bitchy sometimes, so it's cool. Want to take this elsewhere, guys? You could have a flamethrower, an army of robot ninjas, and a motherfucking dragon on a leash in there, and I'd still kick your ass.
I give up.
Second is the overall lack of energy or presence she has to her voice.
Fuck you, David. Tell what, Victoria? It's a photo. Big deal. Miranda's an idiot because falling in love is stupid. What is she, 12?
For better and for, mostly worse, Chloe still had a sense of attitude and persistence to her that made it feel like all eyes were on her anytime she was in the room with people. Here, Chloe sounds so monotone. I can't even say it's to the point where Chloe is starting to learn to have the confidence to be so aggressive and condescending, because when the game starts, we're well into Chloe acting like that. It gives boring teenager energy to a character that should be well past that and has the balls to be an asshole to someone. Third is that her voice is noticeably deeper than it was in the last game.
Me too. Arcadia Bay can suck a bag of dicks.
I'd like to drop a bomb on Arcadia Bay and turn it to fucking glass.
Which I think further adds to the distraction that this is definitely not the same voice actress. Like I talked about with Ashley in the first game, with what she was given, I do believe Rihanna did her best, and regardless of if there was a strike or not, going into a role done by Ashley Birch, especially when she did Aloy in Horizon Zero Dawn the exact same year, that's pretty fucking intimidating. She had extremely big shoes to fill. She does have some decent moments here and there, and I'll give her credit where it's due, when it's due, but this performance does not work for me. As a matter of fact, I'll just say that the voice acting across this whole game isn't that great. It's not only in Chloe's voice. You can hear this game struggling in this area because of the SAG strike.
To tell the truth, I went to bed last night wishing it never had to end.
Rachel posted a slamming selfie of you two having the time of your lives. Do tell.
Hey, just wanted to say, it sucks what is happening to you.
Making sure that you are no longer
abusing drugs or alcohol.
She nearly took your head off.
Oh, I think we're clear, Principal Wells. Someone like Rachel, but not my daughter.
Excuse me?
But consider that for 15 years, she's preferred that money to you.
Just remember I'm here, okay? If you suddenly need something.
This chick doesn't have any family. Or any friends.
While I realize you're being purposefully obstructive, you raise a good point. Many parts of our local ecosystem benefit from fire. Knob cone pine cones, for example. Which require temperatures above 350 degrees to operate.
I don't want to turn this into a case where it seems like I'm saying non-union work isn't as important as union work. Again, this is a Life is Strange video, I'm not getting into all of that. But whether the SAG strikes had anything to do with this, it does not change the fact that for the most part, this game's voice acting just doesn't work. And to add to this, the dialogue is, once again, not great, but in a completely different way from Life is Strange 1. In that game, dialogue could range from passable to genuinely great and layered, to some of the most cringeworthy shit I've ever heard. But you know what? And I can't believe I'm going to say this, Life is Strange by comparison now feels like it had some real passion put into this regard. Life is Strange's dialogue can be really bad at times, but for all of its faults, it's at least memorable. There are so many lines in this game that live rent-free in my head, and that was even before I replayed them for that retrospective. Like, dude, I've got Ready for the Mosh Pit Shakabra playing in my head constantly like I'm in a Minecraft movie showing Screaming Chicken Jockey. How's that for immediately dating a video, huh? I wonder how we're gonna look back on that in a few years. And Before the Storm, we don't really get that. Most of the voice acting sounds really lackluster and monotone, and the lines these actors are given aren't much better. There was a sense of personality to Life is Strange's dialogue, like the kind of dialogue you'd hear from Victoria would be drastically different from Kate's. The dialogue you'd hear from Principal Wells would be different from Mark Jefferson. The dialogue you'd hear from Max would be different from Chloe. That sense of tone, presentation, individuality does not exist with Before the Storm's dialogue. There's very rarely a case I can immediately pinpoint where it feels like the characters are acting and presenting themselves any differently from one another. And it makes for a script that sounds so dull and even lifeless at times. It certainly has its moments where I did get a chuckle, but this was usually for the wrong reasons. Just like Life is Strange 1.
Let's get the hell out of here.
A few standout moments don't do much for a game that already feels like it wants to move on. There is a different thing I have to give this game credit for right up front though. The presentation is much better than the first game. While I wouldn't say it's amazing and does still get stilted every now and then, you can really tell this series got a bigger budget for this after the first game did so well financially. Characters move around with so much more fluidity to them compared to before, and even better, the facial animations have gotten a significant improvement. There are times where they can still look pretty dead-eyed sometimes, but it's still a far cry from what the first game had. Facial movements are much more expressive, the body language for characters is a lot more natural, and to be totally honest guys, I like this art direction more than the first Life is Strange. That's potentially a hot take there, but I never really clicked with Life is Strange's initial art direction, when it came to characters specifically. The impressionistic style it goes for in the world around is still here, but I don't think that really translated super well to what the characters looked like. It's why, for all of its technical issues, I personally preferred playing the remaster of Life is Strange 1 over the original. The original game gave this almost uncanny vibe to it by having these characters look more realistic, but stuck to this impressionistic direction, and I think this contributed to the game's issues with facial and body animations. Granted, Remastered has situations like that too, and it arguably looks worse at times, but I think that's less because of the art direction in that game and more so because they have a 2022 art direction mixed in with technical limitations from a game made in 2015 that they didn't update. In Before the Storm, characters look a bit more animated, almost like they're coming from a graphic novel, and I feel this style fits so much better. It gives the characters more room to express themselves without looking too out of place with the artistic direction the world around goes for. Probably not a popular opinion to have, but I vibe with this art style. Episode 1 starts off like this. Chloe hikes to an abandoned lumber mill to see a punk rock show, her only obstacles being this sign she flips off, okay? And this bouncer who calls out her fake ID. It's in this first part that we get introduced to two gameplay staples to Before the Storm. Like the first game, I really decided to go out of my way and explore everything I could, and like Max with her optional photos, Chloe has parts of the game that she can vandalize with graffiti. Yeah, why not? There's also Before the Storm's answer to something like Max's time powers. This is the Backtalk minigame. At certain points across the game, you can enter the state where Chloe lets out her teen angst and starts acting like a Karen to get her way. You have to select the right dialogue options to either escalate a situation in Chloe's favor, or pick the wrong options that escalates arguments against Chloe instead. Sounds like a cool idea, having Chloe act out and only getting a limited amount of time to do it, until you realize that this is just a Telltale dialogue tree, even down to the timer. Not to mention that the tutorial breaks this mechanic in half as soon as you do this for the first time. Like if a character says something like, "Oh, you want a piece of this?" Then you pick the option that has that exact same keyword. If you take your time to explore your surroundings and talk with other characters, you can use that against them. Like she can use the bouncer's motorcycle decorations against him. Later on in the episode, Chloe finds out that faculty call students like her high risks, and you can use that against Principal Wells. It's really easy to get a grasp on this. As long as you take your time to explore and you pay attention to matching NPCs' keywords with your own responses, you'll never fail these. Not that it would matter much, because guess what? The story progresses anyways if you fail these. Are you shocked? Yeah, neither am I. In my second run on Remastered, I decided to intentionally fail the vast majority of these segments, and every single time, nothing comes out of it. The story still progresses the exact same way, which makes me wonder what the point of making this mechanic was in the first place. Because it needed something like Max's time powers? This is a pretty boring alternative. To get new pieces of dialogue with characters? Yeah, I guess you get that, but it's not like a Telltale game where this really sticks with a character. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but Joyce and Rachel seem to be the closest to being reactive towards Chloe throughout this game, but there's never anything that happens to remind you characters will actually remember how you acted. Responses for the most part are generally the same no matter what your actions are. You do get some moments here and there where interactions happen a little differently, and I'll give them their due credit when I get to them, but for the most part, scenarios are played pretty straight across the entire game. And that's kind of the issue. Not the fact that these scenarios don't drastically change the narrative, it's the fact that they always lead to the exact same outcome. Like I said in the last video, I'm not here to look for something that is extremely detailed when it comes to your choices having consequences. I want to see how the world reacts around me. There are a few moments in this game where that does happen, but it doesn't happen enough. Okay. Let's stop derailing for a second. Story. Chloe makes her way into the mill and you can do your usual Life is Strange shtick here. You can vandalize some more, you can pet a dog, you can steal a shirt from a car selling merch, and even get the option to steal their money altogether. You can run into Frank and have a conversation with him, and he generally seems like a more chill guy, which was kind of bizarre to see. The main thing here is Chloe running into these two drunk bozos and getting into a fight with them. And as they're about to start some shit with a 16-year-old kid, who other than Rachel Amber herself shows up to save the day. The two make their way into the mosh pit of the concert, with Chloe making her way home the next morning. Fundamentally, Before the Storm is the first game without the rewind mechanic. You'll be presented with the same kind of choices as the first game, you can interact with objects in the world and hear Chloe's inner monologue for them like Max did, and you can read Chloe's notes like you could with Max in the first game. The first episode is mainly meant to delve into where Chloe was in between Max leaving and coming back to Arcadia Bay, taking place in 2010. And for probably half this episode, it doesn't really give us anything new. Chloe's still upset over her dad passing away and Max leaving her, she still spars with her mom about David, she still starts shit with David, and she still gets into heaps of trouble while attending Blackwell. All of this, I could honestly give or take. I felt kind of neutral to this stuff being in Before the Storm because, well, we already saw this in the first game. Thankfully, they don't dwell super long on this, and in fairness to the game, there is one key difference here. You're playing as Chloe, meaning you could react to all of this in the same way she would in the first game, and in my remastered run, I did exactly that. Chloe can be just as much of a scumbag in this game as she was in the original game, but you can also choose to react in a more passive way. Unfortunately, this is one area where I kind of missed the time powers from the first game because I wish I had a way to see all these potential outcomes immediately instead of having to play them a second time. Are they going to mean anything? Probably not, but I still do appreciate being able to see every single option I have. But yeah, you can actually make Chloe out to be a lot more chill than she was in the first game. I'm sure some part of that is a reaction to the response she got in the first game, but for now, I'll leave it at that. Because like the first game, there's a lot to unpack when it comes to Chloe as a character in Before the Storm. So also, like last time, I'm gonna try holding my tongue as much as I can, because she's getting her own section again. Anywho, David drops off Chloe at school and you meet a handful of new characters as well as some returning ones. Originally, I had put a bit here talking about how different these characters felt. Like, Evan is here, and instead of being some full of himself photographer, he's the actually type character who has a real hyperfixation of wildfires and wants to get a school assembly put together about them. Remember Hayden, the one who had that raw as fuck line about vaping dank OG bud? He's into Shakespeare. Dana's here too for that. Justin is here and he doesn't really have anything new to offer. He's still a stoner. But then I thought about it more and realized how little I knew about any of them in this game, or the first game for that matter. Besides Dana, I guess, given her whole optional side arc in the first game. Whether or not any of this is in character for these guys, I have no clue. And there's not enough here for me to really care for them this time around either. They're glorified cameos, nothing else. Except for Victoria and Nathan, at least. I like how Victoria is introduced here because while she isn't full-blown Regina George quite yet like she was in the first game, she still has that kiss-assery of wanting to fit in, asking Chloe several questions about Rachel and wanting to know more about what happened with them. She's got some sass, but isn't fully confident in being a real piece of work like she is in the first game. I can 100% buy this being a younger Victoria. Almost like I can buy this being a younger Nathan Prescott, who gets bullied by this jock named Drew, and if Chloe steps in, he has the exact response you probably expect from him.
You think I need help? From you?
You're welcome.
Yep, that's Nathan alright. Also pretty rich how if you choose not to intervene and help him, this character Samantha scolds you for not stepping in to help, even though, you know, she also did nothing. So you might be wondering too, in the first game, Chloe mentioned meeting Nathan in some bar before he tries to use her as one of his subjects for him and Jefferson's photos.
I met him in some shithole bar that didn't card me. He was too rich for the place and too wasted, and he kept flashing bills.
Yeah, so you remember that part? This kind of flies in the face of that. Nathan is clearly aware of who Chloe is. So does this sound like a case of the game retconning something from the original game for this game instead? Keep that on hold because we are going to get back to that. The only thing here you can do that I honestly really liked was this D&D session Chloe can crash. There's these other two students, Steph and Mikey, that Chloe can casually hang out with. And you can play through an almost 20-minute session with the two of them. You can choose to leave at any time or play through the entire thing.
I wiggle my hand. Hey, dragonkin guy. Want to become my meat puppet? How it works is I shove my arm up your ass into your head, and then I can control your mouth from the inside to say things.
Okay, this is actually one of the better parts of the game. Having Chloe interact in this way with other characters and getting to see this more casual, laid-back style to her was pretty refreshing. It was nice to have a situation in this game where Chloe not only treats these classmates of hers with respect, but has a blast spending time with them. I'm only one episode in, but I really like Steph and Mikey. And like the first game's whole side thing going on with Dana, I love this here because it also gives you the idea that Arcadia Bay is a living, breathing world that doesn't entirely revolve around Chloe. It's unfortunately also the only time this episode does this, because outside of this moment, the vast majority of Before the Storm is completely centered on Chloe. Arcadia Bay doesn't really feel as layered this time around, and it doesn't really feel as central as it was in the first game. On one hand, that is a bit disappointing as I would have loved seeing more moments like that from the first game. On the other hand, this town fucking sucks. Keep me away from that shit as much as possible. After all this, we finally get reintroduced to Rachel Amber, who takes a pretty quick liking to Chloe, asking for her input on the upcoming Tempest play and even getting her to skip school with her. Now, Rachel Amber was a real and constant presence in the first game, not just because of how much she meant to Chloe, but how popular she was in Arcadia Bay as well. Everywhere you went in the first game, everyone talked about her with such high regard, like if a perfect person existed in this town, it was Rachel. That same sentiment happens here leading up to meeting Rachel again. Everyone is obsessed at how Chloe somehow got to hang out with the most popular girl in town, and so casually brushes it off. So what is Rachel like here?
Life needs a little mystery, Chloe. Chloe tried to talk me out of it. I've been down that road, she told me. You're better than this. But I wouldn't listen. Just because you can't stop him doesn't mean you don't fight back. The resistance begins now. The stars we're seeing have already been dead for millions of years. One day, I'm going to climb Everest. Let's get the hell out of here.
You know what? I think she might need her own section of the video too. Let's get back to that. Chloe gets to know Rachel more on the train ride to a nearby park. We learn some small factoids about her, find out she's a California girl, and I have to be reminded on how many people in the comments of the last video humbled me about the word hella.
You're hella mysterious, Chloe Price.
Okay, I get it, guys. It's lingo from California. I wasn't lying in that video. I have never heard people say that word outside of this game. I didn't know it was lingo from that northwestern part of the United States. I mean, look at this part. Even Chloe is flabbergasted by that.
Hella? Who says that?
Dude, even she says it. See, that's one of the only times she's based in this series, okay? The two of them do some normal teen shit by looking through a viewfinder and people watching until one of them suddenly gets Rachel pretty upset. So upset that she changes her tune and has Chloe help her rob some wine from a couple having a picnic nearby. Damn, that's an escalation. But not as much of an escalation as the conversations the two of them have when they find the junkyard for the first time.
I've heard that actors are moody, but wow, Rachel.
I'm not moody. I just need some space.
Why are you acting like this all of a sudden?
I'm not acting like anything. I just want to be left alone right now.
You can't just turn on me for no reason.
I'm sorry, turn on you? I guess I forgot. It's always about how you feel, isn't it? Sad Chloe's fucking sad again.
Hey, there's the cringe dialogue I've been waiting for.
I know you're the school princess and all, with the DA daddy and the perfect grades and all the perfect little Victoria chases kissing your perfect ass, but seriously, fuck you.
It's over the top. It's melodramatic. It sounds like a couple of angsty teenagers acting overly tragic. Dude, inject that bullshit into my fucking veins, bro. Let me remind you guys, Chloe and Rachel have only just met for real for the first time today. And they're already having a conversation like this. Like, yeah, I was a teenager once too. Being this overly dramatic is not uncommon. But I don't know, on the very first day you meet someone, Chloe already has an option to talk to her about not wanting to mess up the first real friendship that she's had, and it can even escalate it to confessing her feelings for Rachel? Oh my god, dude, you guys just met! And this is my first major issue with the story. They really rush getting to a moment like this. I could buy Chloe and Rachel having this kind of conversation towards the middle of this story, not at the very end of the very first episode. This kind of emotional hook should only happen after we've established these characters, after we've formed the relationship, after we've gotten time to know them and develop them. I should be invested in this. I kind of want to be invested in this because of how dumb it is, but I can't. I barely know who Rachel is by this point. Give these two some space to develop before reaching this point. Especially with what comes after. It turns out the man that they saw on the viewfinder was actually Rachel's dad, meeting up with and snogging another woman, and yeah, that's pretty heavy stuff. Chloe, to her credit, tries to have an honest conversation with her, to which Rachel proceeds to ask her to leave Arcadia Bay with her, again, way too quick of an escalation, and then goes and starts a fucking forest fire in the middle of fire season.
What just happened?
Episode 1 of Before the Storm has its highlights. I'll give it that. I like the dialogue that Chloe has with Joyce. I like the D&D session. Some of the dialogue is intentionally goofy and did get a bit of a chuckle out of me, mainly during that viewfinder part.
I hope bees don't mistake my shorts for begonia!
But so much of this plays out like someone finding the spark notes of who Chloe was before the events of the first game and crammed all of that into one episode, taking place across a single day. This stuff needed to be spaced out, especially in relation to Rachel. Yeah, we know she and Chloe were best friends and most likely girlfriends from the first game. The two of them wanted to leave Arcadia Bay. This episode takes place in May 2010. Rachel goes missing in April 2013. That's close to 3 years of time you can space out this relationship. I find it really hard to believe that in the span of a single day, Chloe meets and befriends Rachel, they become best friends, have this argument of Chloe not wanting to screw up a real friendship or relationship, Rachel's dad cheating on her mom, and then decide to work towards bailing on Arcadia Bay. I was a teenager once. Teenagers do stupid shit. But even by that metric, things play out way too quickly for me to feel any sense of attachment to anything going on in the story. Oh yeah, what exactly is the story here? There doesn't seem to be a concrete narrative thread yet. Life is Strange's first episode gives you this hook that not everything is right. Something's going on that might connect back to Rachel, and the game very subtly hints that it's gonna be about Max and Chloe searching for Rachel and Max using her time powers to help with that. What exactly is Before the Storm's hook? Yeah, it's about Chloe before the events of the first game and how she develops her friendship and relationship with Rachel, but on what front specifically? Is it working towards skipping Arcadia Bay? It can't be that. We already know how that's gonna go down. Does it have something to do with those two guys at the beginning harassing Chloe? They're brought up there and never mentioned again. Is it going to have something to do with that play, maybe? Is it going to somehow involve Rachel's dad? Like, there's nothing really here that tells me what the game is going to be fully about.
What's going on?
Most games don't tackle these kinds of things. In fact, they try to stray away from them, and Life is Strange embraced that.
And with that, we're kind of saying it's okay not to be okay.
I think it's just very honest emotionally, and I think it deals with really relatable issues and subjects.
Good question. I'm still asking that by the time this episode ends too. I don't know, at least the menu music sounds really good with this backdrop here. Might be another hot take, but I like this game's soundtrack more than the first game. Chloe's the focus and not Max, so we got a lot more grunge and rock to go around this time instead of something more laid back and relaxed. I think it has the same problem as the first game where the OST is a lot more atmospheric than in your face, but it works. The score this time was composed by the band Daughter, and their work is the most prominently featured thing here. They more or less did an entire album just for this game, and I really enjoy listening to it. There's a couple of tracks in this game that are some of my favorites in the entire series. They have that relaxed tone, but the composition is more, I don't know, grounded I guess is the word. The music has a stronger presence all things considered, and I think it's one of the best and most polished things about Before the Storm. Hell, go give the soundtrack a listen separately if it's really your thing. They did an awesome job with this. Episode 2 starts off with Chloe and Rachel getting reprimanded in Principal Wells' office for skipping school. What follows has got to be one of the worst moments of the entire game. If you thought the voice acting beforehand wasn't that great, you are not mentally prepared for what happens here.
We agreed that you would rededicate yourself to becoming an exemplary Blackwell citizen.
We did?
You engaged in the following actions yesterday.
Now hold on. Why is Chloe being punished for someone else's plagiarism?
See, Chloe was afraid I'd get in trouble or hurt, so she came with me. But only to keep me safe.
You're sure Chloe Price didn't coerce you or...
Coerce her? After everything she's been through in the last 2 years, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Miss Price.
I genuinely cannot believe I'm about to say this, but I think I was too hard on Life is Strange 1's dialogue and voice acting. It could get really cringe, sure, and sometimes line reads were not that great. But like I said before, there was a constant sense of passion and emotion in that game's delivery. In this game, it's bad enough that everyone in this whole sequence sounds so fucking deadpan for what is supposed to be an emotionally stressful moment, but there's no flow to this dialogue whatsoever. Nothing here sounds like a natural conversation. It sounds like everyone is taking turns to talk. Chloe's done talking, pause.
The hell I was. I stood up for that little weirdo.
Now it's Wells' turn.
I suppose that's one interpretation of events.
Now it's Joyce's turn.
Say what you will about my daughter, but she is not a bully.
Now it's Chloe's turn. Pause. God, this all sounds so fucking bad. Chloe can choose to stand up for Rachel and take the full blame of what happened, or Rachel can take the blame to partially cover for her. In my first playthrough, I chose to stick up for Rachel, which results in Chloe getting expelled from Blackwell. In my second, I went with letting Rachel take the blame, which results in Chloe getting suspended instead. And this is what I mean by the game's scenarios playing out very straight. Because yes, while this does allow me to get different dialogue, the end result is still the same. Chloe bare minimum gets kicked out for the rest of the year. It doesn't matter how severe it ends up being, and it has no bearing on this story. And it's not like characters give you harsher reactions to getting expelled versus lighter ones for getting suspended or anything like that. This affects nothing. I'll delve more into this when we eventually get into talking about the game's choices again, but I really need to rant about this, especially after enduring all this awful dialogue and voice acting twice. Chloe gets reprimanded by Joyce and David, who storms off to the junkyard. She finds a truck in disrepair, but discovers it can possibly be salvaged and starts sprucing it up. Rachel comes by, and the two have a conversation about their lives and hardships, and in theory, I probably would have liked this moment between the two of them, having a personal heart-to-heart about their issues like this, but the thing is, we don't get any new information out of this. Chloe still hates David and thinks everything sucks. Rachel is still mad at her dad. Nothing here is really new or introspective on either character. It's just restating what we already know about them. Like an in concept, delivery could have been better. And it's also here that the game's issue with restating things really starts to be emphasized. Now, going into this game, you know it's a prequel. You already know what's going to happen with many of these characters. We already know where Chloe ends up in that first game. We know her fate ends with either Max letting her die, or Max letting Arcadia Bay be destroyed so she can be with her. We already know Rachel will eventually be killed by Nathan and Jefferson 3 years after the events of this game. So you really can't design a story like this with stakes in mind, unless those stakes are on other people we didn't see before. Your focus on returning characters has to be building and establishing things we didn't know about them that enhances how we feel about them in the story that comes after. Like, what new information here am I really getting out of Chloe that I didn't know before? How is all of this stuff I'm learning about Rachel supposed to affect how I should feel about her in context to the first game? And if there are stakes attached, they have to be presented in ways that help the characters themselves grow, rather than presented in ways that make us think a character isn't going to make it when we already know they will or won't. With a story like Before the Storm, it has to do exactly that. In its defense, it does get some of that right, which I will get to, but this means the focus for our main characters instead has to be expressing a side of them we haven't seen before. And Before the Storm barely does that. Chloe is arguably the best case here, since you can have brief moments like with what happens in the D&D session, in addition to reading her journal and finding out she really misses Max, which causes some problems in relation to Life is Strange 1. I'll get to that when we talk about Chloe specifically. But that's all we really get. We don't really learn that much new about her as a character as this story progresses. It's all the same stuff we knew about her from the last game, restating what we already know. And what's wild to me is that Chloe is the best example of this in the game. The rest of the returning cast doesn't get this enough, to the point where their inclusion feels less like developing them further and more like Easter eggs for fans to point out and go, oh, first game, that's from the first game, I know that because it's from the first game! Like they probably wouldn't go back and play the first game again instead of this game. I mean, what do we really learn new about Victoria here? She's still a stuck-up mean girl who belittles people around her and will take drastic measures to get what she wants. What about Nathan? I guess he's a bit more of a nervous wreck here than a total psychopath, but he only shows up very briefly in these episodes. We don't learn very much new about David, except for the third episode, but that's getting ahead of myself. He's still a hard ass with a noticeably worse and less intimidating voice than the last game.
Staying out late, ignoring her command, drinking, drug use.
I'm sick of your disrespect. Tell me the truth. That's an order.
Even Joyce, who they do genuinely try to make a more interesting character than the first game, doesn't really go beyond the whole my daughter's a troublemaker, I want my daughter back thing that they do with her. And then with Frank, they try to set up something intense happening between him and Chloe, especially after this sequence in the truck when he arrives at the junkyard and the woman Rachel's dad was with walks out of it. This is followed by a part of the game where Frank takes off on the road with Chloe, and it's presented like it's gonna be this serious thing, but we know what happens with these two characters in the next game. So what's the point of this escalation? To further develop Chloe and Frank's relationship? Not really, things are kind of at the same standstill with them. To establish something new with Frank we haven't seen before? Not really, he's still pretty much the same character he was in the first game, well, at least leading up to this point. To show Frank getting his dog?
Aw, shit! Pompidou, get up here!
Well, okay, I'll never complain about getting to see a puppy in a video game. No, the point is to bring up this partner that Frank works with, Damon. He's this more hardcore dealer who doesn't take shit from anyone and will hurt people in order to get what he wants. In this case, it's Drew's money that he owes both him and Frank. Frank hires Chloe to get the money from him in his dorm in exchange for clearing her own debt and getting a little cash for her and Rachel. You go back to Blackwell and have to solve a puzzle to get into it, which involves pushing this bird around, breaking the sprinkler, and getting Samuel to fix it.
Always, Chloe Price. I didn't think you'd be returning to these hallowed halls so soon.
Oh my god, what is this voice acting? Chloe uses Samuel's keys to get into the building, where the security guard Skip comes to intervene. He'll try to get you off the premises after being expelled or suspended. I started doing the Backtalk minigame, and this episode is where this mechanic gets a little more involved. Keywords are important, but now it's all about paying attention to dialogue options and picking which would fit best. Surprisingly, I failed this the first time I was trying to convince Skip to let me in the dorms, and I was pretty curious to see how this would play out next. Let me tell you guys, it shocked me what happened. Does she actually get escorted off? Does she have to find a new way to get into the building? Does some secret third thing occur that drastically changes your approach? Nope. Nothing. Nothing happens. Skip storms off anyways, quits his job, and lets Chloe go into the dorm. Are you surprised? What? You're not? But these choices mattered so much in the last game, of course they'd matter here. This doesn't play out much differently if you succeed in this either. Go figure. What exactly is the point of this mechanic then if it's not going to significantly change an outcome? Again, I guess it could change your interactions with the characters themselves, but this game is 3 episodes long with an overabundance of characters that get very little screen time like the first game, and a prequel to an already established narrative. Do you really believe this is going to be Telltale levels of this character will remember that with these situations? No, these characters don't act any differently towards you regardless of what the outcome inevitably is. In the first episode, you could chew out Principal Wells about calling students like her high risks in return for not getting in trouble for walking about the play stage. But at the beginning of episode 2, Principal Wells still grills you for that and you get in trouble for it, and Chloe never brings up this leverage. I thought Life is Strange 1 was already bad enough with how it handled decision making, but here at some point the game either straight up lies to you about the weight of your decisions, or holds your hand to ensure the story keeps going how it should. Like, look, if you need to keep things moving on the main path forward, that's totally fine, but then in that case, why even introduce a mechanic like this Backtalk minigame? The entire purpose of this seems to be that Chloe can't talk her way out of everything, so then why not have her failures for that have to result in, approaching these situations at least just a little bit differently? The opening of the game is still one of the best cases of this. If you fail to talk back to the bouncer, you have to find another way into the mill. Is that the most basic change imaginable? Sure, but at least there's some kind of consequence for failing. Yeah, Skip will either begrudgingly keep on with his job or angrily quit here, but the end result is still the same. He lets Chloe go into the building. She doesn't get escorted off and have to find a different way into the building. She doesn't have to try sneaking past Skip in some sort of way. She goes into the building the exact same way no matter what you do. And to jump ahead a little bit here, I can't even really argue that this forms Skip as a character because this is the last time we see him. You can get a little Easter egg of his song going viral on the radio and being interviewed in episode 3 if he quits his job, but that's it. I like that these little things exist in some fashion before the storm. The game at least tries to have characters act or react a little bit differently, but you can only go so far with them when they're handled in the simplest way imaginable, let alone most of them being isolated to each situation by itself. Okay, let's move on. Chloe breaks into Drew's room and gets the money, only to get caught by him and his brother Mikey. Instead of reprimanding her, we surprisingly get what I think is one of the best parts of the entire game. Damon ends up finding Drew, and Drew tells Chloe and Mikey to stay in his room. Damon starts beating the ever-living shit out of him, and you're confronted with either choosing to let this happen, or intervene to give Damon the money and stop him. This was legitimately a tough decision when I got to this. Like I said earlier, stakes in this type of story need to be on other characters. That's exactly what they do in this part. Drew and Mikey are not in the original game. I don't know what happens to them. For all I know, Damon could straight up try to kill this kid right here and now. I decided to stay in and let things play out my first run, and afterwards talk to Drew a bit more. Chloe finds out he was saving the money for his dad who really needs it, and you can also choose to either keep the money for Frank and yourself, or give it back to him. And instead of either character blowing up about it, Chloe and Drew have a genuine conversation. She feels guilty about what she did, and Drew, knowing he's in deep shit, thanks Chloe for giving him a break. In my remastered run, I did the opposite and ran out to give Damon the money, and this results in Mikey getting hurt instead. Drew gets pretty pissed off about this at first, but in the next episode, to get ahead of myself a little bit, he ends up reconciling with Chloe pretty quickly when he realizes that Chloe stepping in might have saved Drew from getting into something much worse with Damon. As I quite literally just went over, I know this is like very basic stuff to have in a choice-driven game like this, but I still appreciate that my choice in this part at least mattered to a degree in how I interacted with Drew and Mikey. It's not being a Telltale game anytime soon. Hell, it isn't even being the first Life is Strange for that matter. But it's something. The game finally made me feel something. I'll take what I can get. For a brief moment, I seriously felt conflicted about what to do, and if the game were full of moments like this instead, I have no doubt in my mind this game would be significantly better. But after this, Chloe goes to meet with Rachel for the play and can speak with a handful of characters. She barely interacts with Dana, and I have to watch my favorite side character from the first game get bastardized to this.
Clueless, klutzy, Chloe. Clumsily crowded, careful creatives. Clueless, klutzy,
Wait a second.
Oh yeah. Peak comedy there. Peak comedy. Talking to Hayden and the theater director, Mr. Keaton, doesn't fare much better. She could eavesdrop with Samantha on Nathan's dad, chewing him out about how important this play is and how he can't embarrass the Prescotts. And if that wasn't pathetic enough, bro's gotta have the least intimidating voice I've ever heard from a character archetype like this.
I don't know who you are, but mind your own business.
Oh my god, okay. Look, I cannot emphasize enough how bad the voice acting in this game can get. And look, I really do not want to throw shade as much as I can because I'm sure everyone on this cast did the best they could. Union, non-union, doesn't really matter. Voice acting is not easy. And dude, I know that this also has to do with some of the direction here because some of these voice performances aren't really that bad. It's just the material that they're given in this. Like, I don't think Rihanna is a bad voice actress. I don't think she's really a great fit for Chloe, but we'll get into that later. But she's not a bad voice actress. She has some good moments in this game. That sequence in the first episode when Chloe finds her dad's car, that's genuinely pretty decent. I really liked that part. Frank's new voice actor was one of the few I did legitimately like in this game as well. So when I was doing research into this game's cast to see who voiced which characters, it blew my mind when I realized who it was. The guy that plays Frank in this game, listen closely to Frank's voice in this game.
Not gonna happen, calm down.
No, this is the first time he's done this. Kid's actually smart.
We're not dealing with a couple of dime bags anymore, Chloe. Where's the money?
Then I don't want to do this again. Come on, man.
Fuck you. None of this matters. All we care about is that you stop asking questions. Got it?
Does that sound a little bit familiar? That's probably because it should. That's Nick Apostolides. That's fucking Leon Kennedy!
September 30th, 1998. It's a day I'll never forget. The cop inside me died that day. And that night, Raccoon City was wiped out, thanks to the bioweapons created by Umbrella. Somehow I made it out, but too many others weren't so lucky.
You know what? Respect, my man. We all gotta start somewhere. Reading through the cast pages for this and the first game on the wiki and IMDb made me have a lot more respect for the voice direction the first game had. Because how do you go from actors doing multiple characters at once, and I couldn't even tell the difference, to every individual character being played by one actor or actress, and it sounds this stilted and homogenous? How do you go from that game to whatever the hell happened here? Was it the game's cast? Was it the script? Was it the direction? Like, what exactly happens for the voice acting to this to sound so monotonous and deadpan across this whole game? Like, it's not just one bad performance, it's not two. So many of the performances are so flat. On that note, though, let's move on and let's talk about the play here. Now, Chloe goes into the dressing room to meet with Rachel. In my first playthrough, since I took the full blame and Rachel was still allowed to perform in the play, Victoria tries to sabotage Rachel by drugging her tea. No matter what you decide to do here, Victoria will eventually be coerced into drinking the spiked tea herself to prove to Rachel she did nothing after Chloe calls her out on it. Victoria will then proceed to faint after the theater teacher more or less says, could this day get any worse? When one of the actors can't show up in time thanks to the wildfires Rachel started. Oh yeah, remember that? There is not a single person who goes to check on her this entire time. Not here, not during the play, not after it, nothing. But okay, let's give the game the benefit of the doubt for a second. My remastered run, Rachel took partial blame, so she got kicked out of the play. So instead, it's this whole sequence where Chloe is distracting Victoria while Rachel does something.
Oh, Price, that was epic. You distracted her just long enough for me to slip those pills into her tea. You distracted her just long enough for me to slip those pills into her tea.
Rachel is the one that drugs her. Leading to the same outcome, except this time, Rachel sleazes her way back into the play. I want to take you guys back to the first game for a second. Like, this is gonna take a few minutes, but I need to make this point very clear. This is how Life is Strange 1 handled characters getting drugged.
He dosed my drink with some shit.
God, Chloe, I can't believe this.
I know I passed out on the floor. I woke up and that perv was smiling, crawling towards me with a camera.
Did somebody drug you?
I remember getting sick and dizzy. I thought it was a doctor until I heard Nathan and felt a sharp sting in my neck. And...
Kate wasn't the first. All those binders are filled with other victims.
How else could I get all these hip new drugs for my subjects?
Rachel Amber was your victim, not your subject.
Nathan thought he could be an artist like me. Instead, the dumbass gave her an overdose.
Jefferson drugged and kidnapped me. I was tied up in his bunker. You have no idea what hell I went through to get back here.
So now that that point has been made, let's look at Before the Storm here compared to this game, and let's see how Before the Storm treats one character getting drugged.
Truly, we are a cursed lot. Even my prodigious imagination cannot conceive of a worse turn of fate.
Ah!
Touché.
Okay. I don't want to be the guy that calls this offensive or disgusting for this, because, look, it's all fiction at the end of the day. I try to refrain from doing that unless the game is intentionally trying to offend me in some way. Like, no one makes art with the intention to purposely offend, you know? But when you have a game like Life is Strange here, and it has, let's go through the list here, villains that abuse their victims through means of drugging them, and it's treated with that kind of delicacy, presented as something deeply serious, unsettling, and violating, especially in regards to how it happens to the characters it does in said game, treated with the seriousness and gravity that something that despicable deserves, even if it doesn't always hit the mark, treated as a bad enough thing that it results in a body count for said game, I expect that a prequel within this same exact universe is going to handle it with that same kind of care and delicacy. You know what I don't fucking expect? For this game to make it like it's a fucking Avengers joke! Who the fuck at Deck 9 thought this was a good idea? How did this pass through so many people and not a single person once said or thought, hey, maybe we shouldn't treat drugging women like it's a funny thing in a prequel to a game where several women are drugged and violated in ways that will scar them forever and even kill one of them. Like Jesus Christ, dude. Okay, let's put my fucking hat on back here. I don't think I would mind it this much if, you know, Chloe at least confronted Rachel about this, or they had some repercussions. And, you know, have Chloe confront Rachel about why she would do that. But no, the play still goes on, the rest of the episode still goes on, the rest of the game still goes on. Don't distract us from this. Rachel drugged her. Jesus Christ, even in my initial playthrough, like, maybe you could argue, oh, Victoria had this coming because she was the one that did this. But they still treat it like her passing out is this funny thing. What's the fucking joke here? Like, are we really gonna have this fucking Disney Channel level joke in a Life is Strange game where the fucking teacher goes, can this get any worse? And then she passes out and then he goes, oh, it just got worse. Bump, bump, ba-dum, bump. Like, fuck off, dude. Holy shit, dude. Fuck this theater teacher in particular, too. The fact that he keeps this play going after one of his students fucking passes out. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, there was intention behind them making this part of the game. Like, this wasn't just some slip up. They wrote this into their script. Nobody said one thing about it, and it made it into the game. The first game has teenage girls getting drugged by creepy-ass men so they can indulge in their perversion. And you treat it like it's a joke in this game. And you know the real cherry on top of this whole thing is the fact that Victoria can get drugged in the original game. And hang on, let me look into this here. So I never got this option in the original Life is Strange, but I know there is a point in the game where she is in the dark room, but let me look more into this here. Hang on.
Victoria, it's Max. Can you hear me?
Max.
Oh God. Where are we? Oh, what's happening? Wait, you warned me. You warned me about Nathan. Then I went to Jefferson for help and he was acting so weird. That's the last thing I remember. And I can't move my hands. Help me, Max. Please, I'm sorry for everything. Max, I just can't believe this is real. I don't want to die like this. I'm only 18. I'm not strong, Max. Look at me. Look what I did to Kate Marsh. Now she's in the hospital, and I'm here.
Oh my god, dude. This makes this even worse than I thought. Like, holy shit. Oh my god, I did not realize it was this serious. This makes us even worse than Before the Storm. Like, here is the original game. They drug Victoria in there, and it's treated like a really horrific thing. But in this game, no, she passes out, and it's treated like a Disney Channel joke. Like, oh my god, dude, this is so embarrassing for Deck 9. I cannot believe this got past so many people, and there wasn't one person that said, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. Like, even if it wasn't a whole thing where drugging characters was a big thing in the original Life is Strange, we're talking about Life is Strange here. Why was there not one person that thought, maybe having a teenage girl get drugged and pass out like that might be triggering for our audience because this is the kind of story that they chose to invest themselves in? Oh my god, that is... That genuinely, that makes it even worse. How do you misunderstand a game this fundamentally? Life is Strange was not always graceful with how it covered sensitive and touchy subjects and topics. You guys are all well aware of what I thought of when it came to how the game handled some of that. But at least it made a real and genuine effort. Even when it faltered, there was still that sense that even if the developers screwed up handling a topic like that they still thought about the repercussions of how it could be perceived if maybe they didn't do it correctly. For a prequel in this same universe to be so dismissive of something like this, and when the original story handled this with as much care and delicacy as it possibly could, is so insulting and disrespectful on so many levels. Not just to the people that worked on the first game, but to the audience that chose to invest themselves in a world and a story that took this shit seriously. And look, I know someone is going to bring it up. They're going to bring up the Return to Arcadia Bay devlog that they made for this game and how they didn't want to mess up talking about stuff like this.
It's a great responsibility. We're dealing with subjects of death and grief and loss and friendship and romance. And I mean, these are things that every single person who's ever lived has felt and felt deeply. And so to just kind of be frivolous with that would be irresponsible.
And look, I'll have to give Deck 9 some grace. I don't think they intended to fuck it up this badly, but this is still really, really bad. This is still, at best, an extremely severe oversight. And it's an oversight big enough that it doesn't really instill confidence in me that they took careful thought into connecting this with the first game. Like, Jesus Christ, I do not like the first Life is Strange game, but even I can point this shit out. Are you guys real fans of this first game or not? Like, again, I want to emphasize, I don't think Deck 9 intended to fuck up this badly, but this is still really embarrassing for them. But I've gone off enough. Let's just move on. I'm done with this. You're so triggered, aren't you? Yeah, I am triggered, dude. I'm playing the worst Life is Strange game, and this kind of fucking proves it. Rachel convinces Chloe to act in the play last minute. It ends up being about as awkward as you can imagine, but you've still got the theater director acting like this about it.
You're a born thespian, my dear. I'll be chasing you down next year. And the ending, absolutely transformative. I am humbled.
Dude, this game's a fucking cartoon. Also, doesn't matter what Chloe does here. She can recite all the lines perfectly or completely fuck all of them up. Everyone still has the exact same response over Chloe killing it and saving the show. I mean, God, I thought the first game could do a bad job of hiding the illusion that your dialogue choices matter or change how characters respond. Sometimes it doesn't matter, and then sometimes your two choices are Chloe basically saying the exact same fucking thing. Chloe and Rachel make the decision to leave Arcadia Bay that night, but not before being stopped by Rachel's parents, James and Rose, and insisting Chloe stays for dinner. If you choose to be flirty with Rachel up to this point and confess your feelings to her in episode 1, this is also where they share their first kiss and truly start their relationship. Chloe deals with what might be the most realistic part of the game by having someone as poor as Chloe interact with a bunch of empty-headed rich white folks. Like, uncomfortably realistic.
If you could please take 4 plates from the cupboard and set them on the table.
What if I can't?
Excuse me?
You said if I could.
You're a riot, Chloe.
The fuck? Dinner is set, and things eventually boil over with Rachel blowing up at her dad for cheating. We get one of the few instances of this game having some alright voice acting. Seriously, Rihanna and Rachel's voice actress Kelly Brown put in some pretty solid work here, and this is where we...
Why can't you just tell me the fucking truth? Stop lying! Stop being a politician for 1 fucking minute! Can't you just be my dad?
Wait a minute! Where did this come from? Didn't Rachel go on and on about how important her dad was to her in the last episode and how close they were before she found out about cheating? So what's this bullshit about her dad not being there for her, or how he needs to start acting like her dad and not a district attorney? This conflict is never even implicated with her dad, just the cheating scandal? I'm so confused. For Christ's sake, this all reads like bad fanfiction. You know what? It kind of is. Ashley herself even said in a dev diary this game was made by fans.
This is a prequel that's being written by fans of the first game. And so that to me was like a huge relief. It was a big, like, okay, this is in good hands, you know?
Are you sure about that? I mean, think about it. A story that focuses on the game's most popular character? Check. Tells us nothing new or insightful about said character besides some things that were likely special interests of the writers? Check. A student who's an even bigger tool and can even bully Nathan of all people? Check. Giving characters that already had only one dimension to them and making them somehow even more one-dimensional? Check. Romanticizing this idea of a character with Rachel instead of making her a more compelling character, period? Check. Angsty teenage dialogue? Check. All of this angsty dialogue happening within a single day or two of Chloe and Rachel meeting instead of across a long period of time? Check. A drug dealer that's more ruthless than Frank was in the first game, so ruthless that Arcadia-based district attorney leaves a file out on him for everyone to see that blatantly lays out all of his crimes, including murder? Like, check. Dude, it checks every fucking box. Like, I don't know. Next you're gonna give me some, I don't fucking know. Like, what stupid shit can we also throw in here that's also bad fanfiction? This is kind of insulting to good fanfiction. I've read some good fanfiction out there, but this is bad fanfiction. Like, I don't know, the long-lost trope, you know, like long-lost brother, long-lost parent, long-lost sibling, like, that's the only thing this game is missing at this point. You know what? I got it. That woman Rachel's dad was with, Rachel's long-lost mother or something. There we go. That woman is Rachel's long-lost mother. That's exactly what this story is missing.
That wasn't my mistress. That was your mother.
And she's her. No, that's bullshit. No. That's bullshit. No. That's some fucking bullshit. No. That's bullshit. It's bullshit. Oh my god, dude, it's bullshit. No, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. This is bullshit. It's bullshit. You guys have no idea, man. I can't take this shit no more, man. It's bullshit. That's some bullshit. I mean, Nate, what is... Give me one thing. This good thing this game did. And you can't say the soundtrack. The soundtrack doesn't count. Life is Strange 2 has to be as good as you guys say it is. I can't take this shit no more. I'm at my limit. I'm at my fucking limit. I mean, really, is there one good thing this game did? You probably can't name it. You probably can't. Oh my god, I can't do this. This game broke. This game's gonna break me. It's gonna break me. Do it. I can't fucking do it. I mean, give me one. Give me one thing. Give me one thing this game gave us.
A few moments later.
That's some fucking bullshit.
Several years ago, we looked across the market and said, we want to create emotional stories and characters that connect with people. Life is Strange is the perfect culmination of everything that we wanted to do.
A sentiment you're going to hear me express a lot for episode 3 is that it has a lot of good ideas, but has no clue what to really do with them. And that starts as early as the beginning following that reveal. Rachel's father, James, explains to Rachel and Chloe how Rachel's bio mother, Sarah, was a high school sweetheart of his who had drug addiction problems, and eventually forced James into a position where he had to take Rachel and leave Sarah. All of this is presented with this viewfinder and generally told in, admittedly, a pretty creative way. It ends with Rachel going upstairs. Chloe has a real serious conversation with James and his wife Rose about the situation, and the dialogue here is also nuanced, has some depth to it, real emotion, some amount of complexity, which only gets expanded once Chloe goes upstairs and talks with Rachel about it, further opening up about her own insecurities and family problems, including telling someone for the first time that she dreams about her father still being alive, as well as the complicated feelings Rachel is dealing with regarding both of her parents.
In my dreams, he's there. It's so real. It's almost like it's another part of my life. It used to be the only part that mattered.
Damn, this is actually kind of good. And like, not in a guilty pleasure way. This is legitimately some alright stuff. Okay, hang on, am I playing the right game here? Let's see. Oh, wait, no, I'm not. After the absolute train wreck the first 2 episodes were, I expected episode 3 to fall even deeper into the hole it dug itself into, but no. This game, in certain areas, starts giving me exactly what I was asking for. They start expanding on Chloe in ways the original game was unable to. They begin expanding on Rachel as a character and try to start giving her some complexity. And the first time I played all this, I kinda liked it. Upon replaying it and mulling it over more, it started to get worse with time because, let me remind you again, while the dialogue and performances are pretty decent here, this is all in service to a literal long-lost family member trope that they bring up out of nowhere. There's no real build-up to this reveal at all. This isn't shocking because it's a surprising twist that was built up or even remotely hinted at. This is shocking because it comes out of left field. At least Life is Strange 1 threw in some subtle hints across the game that someone else was involved. There's no small details in Before the Storm. No blink and you'll miss it moments. Nothing. One of the questions I hear people ask regarding this game is why it even exists in the first place, and if the game wanted to exist to develop Chloe more as a character as well as form Rachel as a character like it clearly intended to, there's nothing wrong with that. But we are so far removed from that in service of a plot thread that doesn't get any of the time to develop or build up it needs to properly tell it, let alone enough time for us to even care in the first place. Why should I care about this sudden revelation when I've barely had time to even care about Rachel up to this point? I also don't like how James seemed to be pretty dismissive in his attitude towards Sarah. He really gave the impression that he thinks drug addicts are inherently evil people or something, when I think most reasonable people will tell you that in most cases it's more nuanced than that. But, in fairness to the game, that impression pays off later. After this, Chloe goes back home and meets with Joyce and David. Joyce completely changes her tune, simply happy to see her daughter again. David legitimately apologizes to Chloe and you can choose to forgive him. He even opens up about losing his best friend when he served with the army. Chloe's still not 100% on board, but like before, I appreciate that they added something new here. Joyce and Chloe aren't on perfect terms yet, but it seems like Chloe is really trying to slowly fix things with her. They even let Chloe go off on her own and simply tell her to be careful. I really liked this at first, until I replayed it and made Chloe act more like a scumbag.
You're out of your fucking mind.
You disrespectful little shit. You just made a serious mistake.
Both of you.
You don't scare me, asshole.
And hey, I'll give the game this. To have the tone here be completely different if you choose to make Chloe a dick is a really nice touch. But it does fall under a pretty big problem that I'll get more into when we talk about Chloe specifically. Chloe goes to the junkyard and fixes her truck. Rachel meets up with her after they decide to contact Frank and get information on where Sarah is, but things escalate when he brings Damon along and he starts demanding answers. An intense scuffle starts when Chloe blurts out Rachel's name and then Damon realizes she's the daughter of Arcadia Bay's DA. One thing happens after another which leads to Rachel lashing out and getting stabbed by Damon in the arm and almost fucking dying, with Frank staying behind to give Chloe time to escape and get her to the hospital. There's this whole scene that plays out with Chloe feeling this crushing guilt as she explains to James what happened and how. She takes some time to collect herself and meets with Drew and Mikey's dad, who has apparently fallen on hard times and needed the money Drew had. Drew has another genuine conversation with Chloe as she does with Mikey and Steph. And alternatively, if you helped Drew earlier, Mikey is here instead, and this is where Drew and Chloe reconcile. She meets with Rose and has a nice conversation with her and even directly acknowledges how fast all the events in this game have happened and how close the two of them have gotten so quickly. There's other optional moments here too. That couple you stole the wine from, they can show up and depending on their backtalk earlier, they'll either be a loving couple excited about having a kid or have an abusive back and forth about it. There's an Easter egg where you can hear Nathan together with Samantha or overhear a conversation where someone is telling his dad his son really needs psychiatric help. When she meets Rachel, Chloe expresses a ton of remorse, not only to her, but in general before and after, feeling awful about dragging Rachel into such a dangerous situation. She runs into that Elliot kid again and does the same thing. I have to give the game props. These are all great ideas they're putting on the table here. But, like I just said, the more you start to think about it, the more it falls apart. So let me break this down bit by bit. The junkyard fight. When I first played this part, it truly shocked me because I didn't really expect them to hospitalize Rachel, let alone have Frank get his hands dirty like this. Even though I know exactly what happens and that Rachel will still be okay by the end of this game, as well as Frank, I don't know how all of this is going to play out. They never talk about this in the first game. For all I knew, this attack on Rachel could have been a footnote in her life leading up to her death 3 years later, or something that deeply affected her as a character. Same thing goes for Frank. To have a character like him stand up for Chloe and Rachel the way he did, this was totally unexpected. Again, I know his eventual fate in the first game already, depending on Mac's choices, but Damon isn't brought up in the game. We don't know much about Frank's past, and this is the first time we actually see some of that. Getting to see sides of characters that we never got to see in the first game, and adding stakes to them, not in whether they literally live or die, but how these moments will affect them as people moving forward. This goes for Drew, Mikey, and Steph as well. They don't get nearly as much screen time, but it's the same deal here. Seeing how the incident in episode 2 affected Drew, how it by extension affected Mikey and Steph, how they're reacting to it, a little bit of how the world around Chloe is reacting to it. Like I talked up so much when I kept praising The Walking Dead in my first Life is Strange video, this is the kind of thing I want to see in these point-and-click narrative adventure games. It's not about how you're changing the narrative directly, it's how the world around you reacts differently. My first time playing this episode, I was seriously enjoying my time. No asterisks attached at first, I was genuinely having a really good time. It wasn't until my second run that I started to notice these issues. The problem with all of this, ultimately, is the execution. You could say this about the entire game, but episode 3 in particular throws a lot of ideas on the board, and none of them ever get enough time to really shine. Every single one of these ideas doesn't get enough time to really be fleshed out. Everything happens rapidly, back to back. If we're going by the Walking Dead comparisons, it reminded me a lot of Season 2, especially A New Frontier where things are constantly on rails. Before the Storm rarely knows when to slow things down, even when it has its own breathing spaces like the first game, which is something I didn't really talk about because, well, the game doesn't really bring as much attention to it. I'll delve more into this when I get into the choices in more detail for this game, but what we have is an episode where it feels like nothing got taken off the cutting room floor. Rachel asks Chloe to go back to her house and find information on her mom through James's office. And not super surprising, remember what I said earlier about James giving me a bad vibe about how he acted about Sarah and how he spoke about her being a drug addict? He said she wasn't clean and she's been choosing checks over her daughter?
So that was a fucking lie.
Turns out Sarah's been clean for a good while now, been denying James's checks, and wants to see her daughter. See her enough that she's getting legally involved with lawyers and whatnot. In addition, James is involved with Damon, who knows where Sarah is. We get a puzzle where Chloe has to give in to Damon's demands by burning evidence of his crimes, selling out whoever ratted him out, and paying him a ransom. First time I played this, I felt pretty smart by looking at the surrounding details and making my decisions based on that. On Remastered, I intentionally kept choosing the wrong things, and wouldn't you believe it, the game forces you in the right direction anyways. Again, not even giving me an illusion. It will always point you to where you have to go. Glad my choices have consequences in this. All of this escalates to finding out that Damon is holding Sarah hostage. Now, normally, I'd probably start wondering why Chloe doesn't get the authorities involved, like with what happens in the first game, after Chloe and Max find the dark room in Rachel's body, but I will give the game this, I think it works out in this game a little bit better for several reasons. One, the urgency and intensity of the situation. In the first game, Max and Chloe were never in any urgent danger for quite a while. They had the evidence to prove Nathan's guilt, but chose not to do anything with it. In this game, it's not just that Sarah is in immediate danger that Chloe has to act on, but she has to think fast on it too. I can buy a 16-year-old Chloe doing something like this impulsively in the moment, with not much to go off of besides what's in the DA's office. Even if you could say it is stupid of her to do, I can't buy an 18-year-old Max and Chloe doing a week-long investigation with an evidence board and tons of proof incriminating Nathan, and by extension any other accomplices, aka Jefferson, not doing anything about it for like half a day and having Chloe storm off the way she does. Second, this is the district attorney's office, and a well-respected one at that, or at least the game tries to establish he's a well-respected one. Who is Chloe going to tell, and who is going to believe her? Maybe David, given his actions in the first game, but Chloe doesn't know that, let alone wants to believe it. This isn't like the first game where there's a perceived compromise like Max and especially Chloe believe. Chloe knows that the DA is working with a despicable drug dealer. It makes sense she wouldn't know who to trust or what to immediately do. Third, she actually calls the fucking cops! Remember that Elliot guy? I've been neglecting talking about him because he doesn't really have much bearing on the story. He's a childhood friend of Chloe's, had some flings with him, nothing beyond that besides talking about the play. They have him follow Chloe to the house, and he has this borderline psychotic breakdown about how he's always been there for her and Rachel is manipulating her. This also comes out of fucking nowhere. Barely know the guy, and all of a sudden he shows up to save Chloe like he's on the front page of r/nice guys. He gives Chloe shit for some of the decisions she made in the game, which I think was supposed to be similar to the first game's nightmare sequence, and it has Chloe really think about the consequences of her actions in this game, but he only does this for like 2 of the decisions you can make. It's like a poor man's version of that conversation with the stranger in The Walking Dead. Have I mentioned how much I love that game, by the way? Anyways, there's one last Backtalk segment here where Chloe uses James's burner phone to call the police. And the Backtalk segments are essentially Chloe conversing with Elliot while also trying to make clear to the 911 operator what's going on. The police show up, Chloe bails, and Elliot supposedly takes the heat for what happened. But dude, this did kind of freak me out on my first run. I was truly wondering for a second if they were going to do something drastic here to add to Chloe's backstory and trauma in some way. Thankfully it doesn't, and frankly thinking about it now with a more clear head, I don't believe it was ever going to be a real threat to her. But the idea did get implanted in me for a second. At least that's what I thought until I played this part a second time on Remastered and noticed several more cracks. First of all, that graffiti collectible thing that's supposed to mirror Max's photos in the first game, you can do that with a drawer in the fucking DA's office. Because nothing says smart and intelligent like having Chloe vandalize a room she broke into and incriminate herself like this. Real quick side tangent, some of these graffiti options are stupid. If you really want to add these in places where it makes sense, like an old lumber mill or something, okay. But not in very public places like this. All you're doing is bastardizing Chloe as a character more by intentional design this time. Second of all, everything I talked about with Elliot, like the rest of the episode, only works in concept. You barely interact with him across this game. And in my second playthrough, I didn't interact with him at all. When I first played this segment, I admittedly felt a little tense. I didn't know Elliot, I didn't know what he was capable of, and having him come out to Chloe like this out of the blue? Yeah, it is random, but it's a scary kind of random. But if you fail that Backtalk segment with him, well, for starters, Chloe shatters a window and gets the cops to come anyways. Glad my choices have consequences. But Elliot fucking bails and leaves Chloe behind. Why would you build him up to be this weird threat Chloe has to deal with and immediately follow it up with him bolting like this? Is he supposed to be dangerous here or not? This is giving mixed signals. Was the point to make it seem like he was all bark and no bite? We don't know enough about him to really come to that conclusion. Elliot needed more time spent on him because without that build up to justify this moment, It comes across as yet another moment that would be cool to have in this story, and never really going beyond that. Third of all, to move past Elliot, this whole segment really exposes how dumb of a villain Damon and even James really are. Okay, let's switch gears here. Now, the game finally establishes that he was working with James to kill Sarah, or bare minimum, intimidate her to the point where she wouldn't want to try seeing Rachel again. Damon is totally unaware of why James wants Sarah off the map, and even says as much when he threatens Rachel. So why then, even for a second, does he try to threaten and even borderline kill Rachel and compromise any deal the two of them have? Yeah, Rachel technically attacked first and he fought in self-defense, but A, that was after he started threatening Rachel, and B, after he stabbed her, he would have gone further if Frank hadn't stopped him and allowed Chloe the time she needed to get Rachel out of the junkyard into the hospital. This was not a self-defensive move. He gets back up and goes after her and Chloe. He very clearly intended to fucking kill Rachel here or worse. Does he want that deal with James or not? You think the DA is going to help you after that? Hell, does he really think in general that James would actually help him after whatever is going on with Sarah? Chances are, he would go right back to trying to imprison him afterwards and pin the blame all on him. And on that note, what was James's ultimate plan? I mean, no matter what way you spin it, James is a criminal too for what he did here, but there's no general idea of what exactly he wants to accomplish besides getting Sarah out of the picture by any means necessary. Does he want Sarah to back off? Does he want her straight up dead? What is it? My initial impression was that maybe he's doing all this to knock two birds out with one stone, get Sarah out of the way and then pin it all on Damon because who's going to take his word versus a district attorney? But nope. We don't get any kind of modus operandi like we did with the first game's villains. And maybe you could argue that this entire deal is shaky to begin with, and that's the point of this, but this doesn't read like a deal formed on unstable grounds. This reads like a duo of villains that didn't get the proper time they needed to reach this natural conclusion. Chloe drives off to save Sarah at the burned down lumber mill, and as she tries and fails to stop Damon from...
No.
Go to your fucking happy place.
Wait, hold the fuck up. She's tied down and gets drugged by Damon? And the game treats it seriously? Okay, y'all have no goddamn excuse for Victoria now. So when any other character does this in these two games, oh, it's this dreadfully serious and disgusting thing. But when Rachel does it to another student, LMAO, she's so quirky, now Chloe has to do the play with her, let's go lesbians! Look, I don't care if this game opens up with a disclaimer saying how they don't endorse the actions of what they're writing. This franchise set a precedent for how it handles subject matter like this. I expect that they're going to fully take it seriously. Not endorsing what's in your script doesn't make up for bad script writing. It is bad enough that Before the Storm contradicts the groundwork they formed on addressing these topics in the first game, but then they contradict the groundwork they formed in their own game! How and why should I be expected to take Sarah's drugging seriously when you actively chose not to do that when it came to Victoria? Look, I understand there's nuance to this, and not every time they talk about serious topics has to be one-on-one the same. But what message are you trying to deliver in your game when one drugging has the energy of a bad SNL skit and the other is framed as a hostage situation? Oh, but the game is trying to frame Rachel as this cunning and manipulative. I'm gonna stop you right there. I will get to that aspect of this whole ordeal later. An injured Frank intervenes, and it's all but confirmed that he kills Damon off screen. Chloe has a conversation with Sarah about what happened, and honestly, it's one of my favorite conversations in the entire game. Sarah starts having doubts about meeting with Rachel and tells Chloe not to tell her that any of this had happened. What we end up getting is an incredibly mature chat between the two, as Chloe discusses this meaning a lot to Rachel, how she knows about Sarah's regrets for not being there for Rachel sooner and not wanting her to screw up a second time. She even acknowledges that she might be in over her head and not fully understand everything that's going on, but keeps pressing Sarah in the hopes that she'll see that she's a person worth fighting for, and someone that Rachel can and will let into her life if she gives her the chance. Holy fuck, man! Introspection and maturity? From Chloe fucking Price? Man, where was this in the first game? Wait, hold on, I forgot she's getting her own section again. And depending on your actions here too, this will determine later on if Sarah decides to end up truly meeting Rachel, as indicated by your choices in the final episode, adding new layers of depth to Rachel over the knowledge that her father is a criminal who almost had her biological mother murdered, and no matter what way you spin it, further adds to the tragedy of her dying, knowing that her parents fucked up their relationship with their daughter this badly, and her real mother, regardless of the outcome, either never getting that moment to reconcile with her daughter, or managing to get that and have it taken away from her 3 years later by Jefferson and Nathan? Dude, I can see the ideas Deck 9 has here, and to their credit, they're actually all great, but God, do they fumble the delivery of it so badly in this game. And then we're at the very end. The game ends with its final choice, either telling Rachel the truth of what happened, or keeping it a secret. I chose to tell her. Personally, I believe this relationship with her father was done the second he wanted to get rid of her biological mother like this. Dude's an actual fucking criminal. And the game ends. It just ends here. There's a sequence showing what all the characters are up to after the fact. David proposes to Joyce. We see Elliot leaving Blackwell altogether, so it's not like that confrontation earlier really amounted to anything. We see Frank pour one out for Damon, pretty much confirming he's dead. And then probably the most ridiculous thing in this last segment. Okay, I need you guys to be seated for this one, okay? Get a load of this bullshit. There's a post-credit scene of Rachel's phone ringing in the dark room as her pictures are being taken the night she died. Like, bruh, did you really make a fucking post-credit scene for this? Yeah, because if there was something I was missing from the original Life is Strange, it's a post-credit scene teasing the fact that Rachel is about to be ruthlessly assaulted and murdered. You can't fucking take this seriously when A, you're presenting and pushing this moment like it's a big fucking MCU post-credit scene, and B, to emphasize again, you just pulled the shit you did with Victoria. Again, with Sarah and now this, oh, now you want me to take it seriously? Sorry, I couldn't hear you over Nick fucking Fury explaining the Strange Life Initiative to Rachel goddamn Amber. And again, here is where my major problem with episode 3 lies. All of this stuff happens so quickly and rapidly that I don't really know how to fully process it. There's so much ambition and maturity put into how they handle all of these topics and themes throughout episode 3, mostly. But the problem is that all of it is crunched into episode 3. This kind of writing needed to be spread out across the first 2 episodes as well, because while I appreciate this game's episodes got better over time, episodes 1 and 2 are still pretty bad. They have their highlights and their moments, but they're still not good. There's rarely anything added of value to the existing characters, and with a few exceptions, nothing of significance done with the new ones. But at the very last minute, they start throwing one idea after another, and none of it really gets the conclusion it deserves. Do we get to see the consequences of Rachel's father basically planning an assassination on her mother? Nope. Do we get any conclusion to Damon being brought into the mix? Not exactly. Like I said, it's confirmed that Frank killed him, but he comes and goes just like that. Do we see the consequences of Elliot harassing Chloe and taking the hit for her? I mean, kind of. He is moving out of Blackwell now in both endings, but it's still him moving out of Blackwell. What exactly new do we learn about characters like Nathan and Victoria? Nothing really. What happens to new characters like Steph, Drew, and Mikey? You tell me. And before someone says it, yes, I know Steph is also in True Colors, but we're not at that game yet. We're talking about Before the Storm in Isolation. I can't really help but wonder how much interference there was this time when they were making this game, especially after I brought up that Q&A earlier and they were insisting, oh, this is a story we want to tell right now, like not later, not after the strikes, we want to tell it now. And you know, regardless of whether Ashley was going to be part of this game or not, I wonder if Square interfered in some way, because Dontnod had a lot of freedom in making the first Life is Strange, and obviously Square loved the pitch, but after the success of that game, maybe they wanted to try replicating that game's success without kind of understanding, you know, the only reason Life is Strange 1 is the way it is because Dontnod had that creative freedom to make whatever the hell they wanted. And maybe they wanted to replicate that, but just didn't understand the only way they could do that is by letting Deck 9 do its own thing. And I don't know, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe Deck 9 had all the freedom in the world to make this game too. But either way, it feels really off to me that episode 1 and 2 would be as bad as they are. Like, episode 2 of this game is insultingly bad, if I didn't make that clear. But the fact that they overloaded episode 3 with all of this stuff, and it's good in theory, it's good in concept, I will emphasize, there are good ideas in this episode, but there's no real cohesion to it. This game needed to have a full 5 episodes with one consistent vision, because as it is here, Before the Storm's narrative plays out like a series of events rather than a proper story. And when that story eventually does start to take shape, it's when the game is about to end. The game takes too long to let the same ideas, themes, motivations, backstories, and characters ride the wave for 2 episodes, before remembering in the 3rd episode that they needed to add something new of value in order to justify making this story. Some of what happens in episode 3 needed to be sprinkled out through the entire season, and it absolutely should not have happened over the course of 3 days like Chloe herself even acknowledges. Have episode 1 be about reintroducing Chloe and meeting Rachel for the first time. Have the end of that episode be that emotional hook about her dad meeting another woman. Have episodes 2 and 3 further develop Chloe and Rachel's relationship, but over a longer period of time than just a day. Spread this story out over a longer period of time so it's more believable when Chloe and Rachel have their more intense moments together, like that moment in the junkyard. Make Damon more of a background presence that makes himself known halfway into the story instead of at the very end. Like I said, have Chloe and Rachel's big fight take place in the middle of the series and make that the moment where more romantic feelings start to develop between them, if you so choose as the player. Have the reveal of Rachel's mother be in that same episode too, and have a 4th and 5th episode for episode 3's content, spread it out, and develop it deeper. I don't know, something, man! You can't rush a story like this in 3 episodes, especially when only one of them has all the right emotional hooks and beats to it. There's a reason this 5-episode model works with so many of these types of games. You have to take your time with it, and more importantly, it has to both justify its existence and naturally flow into what happens next. I can finally in episode 3 see the justifications of it existing here, but it doesn't naturally flow. Especially in Chloe's case. So now let's get into her and talk about— oh my god, who is calling me when I'm trying to do my video here? Gosh. What's that? There's a bonus episode. Oh! Okay. I guess we'll talk about that real quick.
We spent so much time recording together on the first game, and I feel like we both went through such deep emotional transformations with these characters, and we got so attached to them. So there's something really surreal but so wonderful about being these characters again, and particularly to be able to act with them.
Yeah, Before the Storm got an extra episode after release in March 2018. This one takes place in 2008, on the last day Max and Chloe spend together before she moves to Seattle. You'll notice 2 things when you start this episode. 1, you're playing as Max again. 2, do you hear that?
She's probably cooking with the radio on. She won't hear a thing. Tell me that wasn't the coolest thing you've ever seen! Well done, fellow scallywag. Come on. I want to spend every minute we have together having fun.
Yep, strike's over. Ashley is finally back as Chloe. They also brought back Hannah Tell as Max.
It feels like I've spent half my life hanging out in this room. Probably because I have. Ahoy, Bluebeard! I have brought the stickiest tape in all the 7 seas. I'm just getting some light. This cavern is even darker than I remembered. I should have just told you earlier. I feel so stupid.
Really speaks volumes about their talent as these characters that this one bonus episode unironically has the best performances in the entire game, and it's them playing a couple 13-year-old kids. That's not even in relation to the voice acting for the rest of the game. This game could have had the best voice acting in the series, and it still wouldn't have come close to what these two are capable of as Max and Chloe. Ashley and Hannah are simply on another level as these two.
Coming back to playing Max after 2 years, first, it's a huge honor. I love playing Max. She's the closest character to who I am as a person I've ever played.
It's so nice. It's it is nostalgic, and it's nostalgic in the best way.
Their performances as these characters are incredible. I'm glad to have them back. There isn't really a ton of substance in this episode. What you see is what you get. Max is struggling to figure out how to talk to Chloe about her moving away, but both of them get distracted when they find an old treasure hunt they made when they were 8 years old. The two of them work on it and find a time capsule of a bunch of their old stuff. Max and Chloe have a nice chat about her moving, but then Joyce comes home to bring the news of William's death. The episode ends with Max leaving for Seattle, and Chloe listening to one last message from Max. Not much to this episode, and if I'm being totally honest, you can probably skip by in this. Don't get me wrong, having Hannah and Ashley back is awesome and all, but like Before the Storm as a whole, there really isn't anything new brought to the table. There are a few moments of note, like, wow, Max's parents really drag her away from the funeral and go straight to Seattle. That's a little fucked up. I get their lives can't be put on hold, but a little empathy would have been nice. Also got me wondering what exactly happens that caused Max to drift apart from Chloe now too. She's obviously pretty distraught about leaving Chloe even before she finds out about William's passing. You'd think she would be the one trying to stay in touch. Obviously, whatever happened in that 5 years, it would have been fine regardless. I talked about that in my last Life is Strange video, but it did get me curious. I also feel like this episode, ironically, ended up having the opposite problem of Life is Strange 1. Man, this is the one time I expected the game to lean into the cringe, since they're quite literally kids in this episode. But nope, the dialogue plays it pretty straight. So straight that I personally cannot see a 13-year-old kid inner monologuing like this.
In a few days, my whole family moves to Seattle. No idea when I'll see Chloe again. This could be my last chance to say goodbye. But how do you tell your best friend that you're leaving her? It's so weird being back in this attic after so long. I remember being terrified of this place. I think when you're a kid, you're only afraid of things that can hurt you. But when you get older, you become more afraid of hurting the people you care about.
It sounds a little too sophisticated for someone this old to be talking in this manner. Now look, every kid is different, so I'm not going to act like a kid talking or thinking like this is not possible, because it certainly is. But me personally, when I was 13, I wasn't thinking complex shit like this. I was trying and failing to do the Cup song from Pitch Perfect, crying myself to sleep knowing the world was going to end on December 21st, 2012, watching Markiplier play, fuck, I don't know, fucking Sunday Tubbies or some shit. My point is, the dialogue's a little goofy in how straight they play it sometimes, but besides that, there's nothing too of note here. You can have Max interact with some stuff, and it gives some more insight into Max and Chloe's friendship around this time, which is pretty neat. There's early snippets of Chloe becoming a problem kid with her misbehaving at the beginning with Max, and finding out she got into a fight at Blackwell. You can go outside and interact with this rock that—
Poor Bongo. Chloe took his death so hard.
Wait. Her cat died the same year? After the game was trying to make me feel empathy or sympathy for her, because, I don't know, her fucking dog died 5 years ago. Dude, I was joking when I talked about that in the first game. So in 2008, Chloe had her pet cat die, her father die, and Max leave her literally 3 days later? Damn, they really added that detail about her cat to make this even more tragic for the first game? Holy shit, dude, they're really gonna put Chloe through the fucking ringer in this game. Wow, okay. I don't care how much they added here, dude. I'm not gonna sympathize with Chloe, okay? I'm waiting for her own section. Oh, yeah, I guess we kind of are in her own section. I guess I didn't make that joke this much in this video, did I, huh? I guess that joke's dead. Just like Chloe!
Chloe is a wrecking ball that just bashes through the things that are in front of her and creates consequences and damage as she goes. And she can't take that back. And that was really important to us, of telling Chloe's story and making now those consequences, you're really gonna feel them, and those choices, you're really gonna agonize over them. That's a difference I think that's gonna be really powerful.
So, we meet again, blue hair and pronouns. Oh god, dude, that joke fucking sucked. If you recall from my retrospective on the first Life is Strange game, you know that I absolutely despise Chloe Price. She's someone I consider the worst fictional character I've ever dealt with in a work of fiction, both for reasons involving the game, as well as very personal reasons involving how the character reminded me of pretty toxic people in my own life I had to deal with. She is the embodiment to me of how art can affect us personally in ways we don't expect and can't expect, and it happened to me in such a deeply personal way that, while I know was the opposite of what was initially intended, forced me to come to terms with the fact that I had surrounded myself around friends that treated me the same horrible ways Chloe treated Max. It makes me reflect even to this day on how I choose to treat the people I care about, and watching for signs on how people who care about me treat me as well. It was a whole thing. I'm not going to go into the full details on it again. Now, why did I decide to make a section on her again? Is it because she does this same thing again? Is it because they make her an arguably worse character? Is it because this game pulls the same thing the original did by finding manipulative ways of forcing me to sympathize with her? Well, no. I'm going to tell you something that'll blow your dicks off. because it's more insane than that. Are you ready? Because it's going to rock your whole fucking worldview. 3, 2, 1. Chloe Price is the best part of this game. And not by process of elimination, not by way of guilty pleasure, not by way of ideas they execute on that fall flat, although this game does have some of them, by Chloe Price being a legitimately good character in this game. I like Chloe in this game. Sort of. A little. It's complicated. Yeah, I know. Everyone's probably freaking out, and you're probably asking, why? So, let's get into that. I won't get too into Rihanna DeVries' performance as her since I already covered that, but I'll say again, given the circumstances surrounding this game, like planets aligning kind of circumstances, I think she did the best she could. I personally don't think her performance always sticks to landing, but she does have some good moments of voice acting here. The argument at the dinner table in episode 2, when Chloe breaks down seeing her dad's car, Chloe's emotional breakdown following the junkyard fight, well, mostly this one line where she says, "Fuck you, David," is not that great.
Fuck you, David.
It was the junkyard scene in episode 1 where Chloe is just like crying and beating on cars and things. And Phil had told me, as a motivation, he just said, "You can't be with someone you love anymore." And immediately that person popped into my head. And since then, it's just been holding on to the memory of who they are to me and how they feel in relation to me. That's been driving how I play Chloe for a lot of this.
These are all highlights. She can be a decent voice actor, but I don't know, man. I hate to throw this performance under the bus and say what we had before was better, but Ashley is such a hard act to follow. It's like seeing Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man or hearing Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime. You can't envision anyone else in the role of Chloe besides Ashley Birch. And that's no fault of Rihanna, for sure, but that's the power a good performance can do. Ashley Birch doesn't just voice Chloe in the first game, she is Chloe. Rihanna DeVries voices Chloe, but very rarely do I feel like she is Chloe. And those few moments seem to be when she's impersonating Ashley. I have no doubt that Rihanna is a talented actress. I simply think she may have been a little miscast in this role. Let me talk about Chloe in regards to my first run before I get into my remastered run. It did take me some time to warm up to what they did with Chloe here. Episode 1 kind of had that when she does that D&D session with Steph and Mikey, but most of the episode is generally the same shit we had in the last game. Chloe misses her dad and Max, she's at odds with Joyce, she hates David, she smokes weed, you know the drill. But when it comes to her best moments in this game, I think most of her improvement comes down to one major thing. You're playing as her this time, meaning you get to choose how she reacts. And how I had Chloe react to the world and the people around her gave us a side of Chloe that, while still 2D and dickish, showed an emotional side of her that we very, very rarely got to see in the first game. In the original game, Chloe was constantly standoffish, aggressive, selfish, self-centered, always thinking about herself, always full of herself. And Before the Storm, you can have moments where Chloe holds her tongue and doesn't do anything. She could be a dick towards David, but she can also choose to let him rant his piece and get on with it. She can have conversations with her mom where she at least tries to be more understanding and empathetic towards her position and what she's doing as her mother. She's able to have moments where she's emotionally vulnerable, especially with Rachel, opening up about her life circumstances in a more meaningful way with other people. Like I said, it's redundant and doesn't really tell us anything new about Chloe. But having her open up to anyone else like this is still leagues above what she did in the first game. She doesn't always act like her hot-headed self, but sometimes she does this and gets way over her head. The two guys at the beginning of the game immediately stand out. We get to see new sides of her we didn't before, like how she has dreams about her father, her opening up to Rachel about this, the guilt she feels about some of her actions in the game, and on that note, the guilt. In episode 3, after Rachel gets hurt, Chloe is a total wreck. Blaming herself for what happened, scared for her life, and scared for someone she considers her best friend, how she could have intervened to help, or how she should have been smarter than to bring Rachel into such a dangerous situation like she did. Chloe in the first game never would have acted like this. She sure as hell didn't the multitude of times she dragged Max into shit, I'll get more into that in a bit. When Damon comes to get Drew, she can choose to do the right thing and give Drew his money back. Sometimes she's smart about what risks she should and shouldn't take. Like when that t-shirt vendor gives her a hard time and she manages to steal a shirt, She can also steal some money, but you can also choose not to do this, and Chloe will even confirm, yeah, I'm not going to push that any further than I have. And then finally in the last episode, when she shows that amazing amount of emotional maturity across the board, making an attempt to try things with Joyce and David, hearing out David's story, all the discussions she has at the hospital, that imaginary talk she has with her dad about keeping secrets and how Chloe would react if her dad did something like James did to Rachel, coming to terms that she may never know and that could be for the best that she doesn't, like she's overall coming to terms that maybe her own father wasn't perfect and that's okay, and maybe it could even be a stepping stone to helping her cope with her grief? This all leads to that talk she has with Sarah, all that maturity she can show, how she can unconsciously convince her to still meet her daughter, regardless of if Chloe tells Rachel the truth of what happens. I know a lot of this is ultimately up to player choice. If you really wanted to, you can make Chloe out to be just as toxic as she was in the first game, and there were a couple of times I did that in this first run, but even in this game's case, when you're playing as her as a more loose character, some of what she does is still done in service of developing Chloe's relationship with the people around her. You can do this with Principal Wells, for example, and it's in service of standing up for Rachel. It certainly is an incredible work. I wouldn't even say it's really awesome or great or good, but it's solid. This isn't like the first game where you sympathize with Chloe through supplementary material or some fucking my bad text. You learn to sympathize with her through the actual gameplay. And on a level that not even the first game would have been able to achieve since Max was the playable character there. It's very clear to me that all of this even existing, that you have choices like this in regards to how Chloe acts, and that some of these choices are in service of trying to make Chloe a better character, that is arguably Before the Storm's greatest strength and greatest accomplishment. It could have been very easy to leave Chloe as she was, but allowing people like me who disliked her so much to connect with her, to have changes and improvements to her, and to have it be something that you can decide in gameplay instead of locking it in the narrative, I'm very impressed. It's clear to me that Deck 9 saw the response Chloe got and wanted to figure out, how do we bring back this character in a way that will win over fans and non-fans alike? Even though I think most non-fans are not as crazy as I am and probably walked away after the first game, but that's a me thing. And I would argue that for the most part, they succeeded. For a game to take a character I hated this much, put in all of these new ideas and nuances to her, and deliver it in a way that makes sense for the medium it's being delivered in, I have so much respect for that. So I'm always going to have the same feelings I do about Chloe in the first game that I do now. But Before the Storm, it feels like I'm playing a totally different character. Like one guy I can get behind, one that I can sympathize with, and one that I can respect and enjoy their presence here. But that's also kind of the problem. This Chloe and this Chloe are two different characters. Let's briefly talk about my remastered run. I chose to actively treat everyone like a prick this time, as much as possible. And what I ended up getting is a Chloe I can 100% see becoming who she does in the first game. A toxic, vitriolic, ridiculously petty character that treats everyone and everything around her like shit. The only person she ever really cares about if you choose to play this way is Rachel, and even that approaches its limits at times. Chloe can be extremely unlikable if you choose to make her so, almost to a pathetic degree because the Backtalk segments and some of what she comes up with are practically middle school playground insults.
Oh, that's what I smell. A giant load of crap.
Seriously, Chloe's gotta be the least intimidating threat in the whole last game, and you can tell she thinks she's hot shit. Guess that's pretty accurate for a teenager, I suppose. In any other game, I'd find this level of versatility to be a good thing, and if we were talking about Before the Storm in isolation, I would argue that it can be. At least in concept, execution is entirely different. Where this game fails Chloe is in the fact that it is a prequel for a character you don't play as and is already established. The Chloe that I just showered all my praise towards right now is not a Chloe I can believably see becoming who she does in the first Life is Strange. In adding so much more nuance, emotion, depth, and maturity to Chloe and her story, and making her generally a much better character in Before the Storm, they accidentally made her character in the first game worse. Yes, I know the canon of these games is kind of wonky given the expanded material they've put out for the series, and I'll get to some of that later. But let's take this at face value for someone who plays these games casually. All they're going to see is that this game is a prequel. So you're telling me that in the 3 years between Before the Storm and Life is Strange 1, Chloe actually becomes a worse character? This level of nuance and maturity is nowhere to be seen in Life is Strange 1. She is constantly a selfish asshole in that game to an almost comical degree. What the hell happens in that 3-year gap between these games? I can't even really say that Rachel's death is a catalyst that does this, because you can still choose to make Chloe just as toxic as she was in the first game. It's already hard for me to get behind Chloe not making any progress in her character in the first game, besides how desperately they shove it in at the last minute in episode 5, but now you expect me to believe that there was a Chloe that, while still emotionally immature at her core, could still show moments of real maturity and character growth, and she becomes who she is in the first game? Where she seemingly has little to nothing left after Rachel disappears? What happened to Steph and Mikey? I know they weren't exactly friends, but they seem to be pretty tight regardless of your actions in the game. This is also the case if you choose to play her like a scumbag, because instead of having a character that regresses their behavior and attitude, you have a character that does not change or grow for 2 whole games. If that toxic Chloe is the Chloe you decide to go with, you have a Chloe that is the exact same character in this timeline for 3 years straight. She would start her journey as we personally know it as a teenage asshole in episode 1 here. She ends her journey as a teenage asshole in episode 5 of the first game. I think this problem is best expressed through Chloe's journal entries throughout the game. In the first Life is Strange, I wanted to talk about these more because they gave more insight to Max's inner monologues and you can get more out of how she feels about certain characters, events, etc. But I decided to axe it since ultimately there wasn't a ton of new immediate information that came out of these presented. What stands out about Chloe's journal entries, however, is that while they do the same thing, they're all addressed to Max. Before the Storm makes it clear that Chloe really misses Max. It isn't thrown at you in overabundance like the last game, but sometimes you'll have moments where Chloe is reminded of Max and in one way or another expresses the feeling of really missing her.
Well, I used to. Friend. Singular. Her name was Max, but she left for greener, more northern pastures.
That sucks.
You can even see in their text messages when Max stopped talking to her altogether. Every single journal entry in this game from start to finish is addressed to Max. She shows bitterness about Max leaving her, but there's also moments where she wishes Max was still around. The fact that she's writing these in any capacity proves she still cares deeply about Max, and beyond the bitterness, wishes the two of them could be friends again like good old times. There's even a dream sequence note where she gets a letter back from Max and they reconcile. And by the end of the game, there's one last note where she acknowledges these letters are a lie to stay in the past, but now she's with Rachel and wants to move forward in the present with her, and how maybe that's okay. This is what I was talking about in the first video. It is okay to have people come in and out of your life. We have Chloe accepting that here and now in this game. So why does she treat Max the way she does in the first game? If Chloe is able to have this level of maturity, realizing she has to move on from Max, why does she regress back to an emotionally charged tool that treats Max the way she does in the first game? With how all of this is presented, it's natural that Chloe would be pissed at Max in the event she did come back. And as I said in my first retrospective, that is okay. Chloe is justified in being upset about that. So why, when their relationship starts to rekindle, does Chloe have so many moments treating her like garbage or forcing her into dangerous situations on a regular basis? Chloe may be upset with Max, but this journal gives the impression that she could still reasonably reconcile with her, especially when she decides it's time to move on and Max is just someone part of her past life. Why throw all that emotional complexity out the window the moment Max comes back into her life? And if we're going to talk about the junkyard fight again earlier, if Chloe was a total wreck for how she dragged Rachel into one dangerous situation, why does she willingly drag Max into several? This game proves she knows the weight of her actions if something like this were to happen again with Rachel. Why does she get Max involved with her scuffles with Frank? Why does she blame Max for the weed in her room if that decision came to that? Why does she go on a rampage to find Nathan and drag Max along, knowing full well the potential consequences, especially when one of them happened to Rachel in the exact same junkyard? Can you see the problem with adding this stuff to something that is a prequel? And look, I realize this is the reality of making a prequel to a story, and in Deck 9's defense, there was probably no way they were ever going to be able to write around any of this, because how can you reasonably do that? Unless you made Chloe out to be a narcissistic prick the entire game like I did in my remastered run, There's no way you can tell me that this version of Chloe in Before the Storm becomes the Chloe we know in Life is Strange 1. In genuinely wanting to improve Chloe in this game and make her a decent character, addressing all the problems people have with her, but still maintaining those elements fans love about her, they ironically made Life is Strange 1 to be a worse game. Because either all of this progress Chloe makes is completely wiped clean slate, or she's quite literally the exact same character she was in the prequel as she was in the original, with no room for growth whatsoever. I'm not exaggerating. This makes me hate her in the first game even more than I did, because now, in one of the few times Deck 9 actually has something over Dontnod, they proved there is a proper way to write and create a three-dimensional character like this, and Dontnod didn't do that. That leaves Chloe Price as a character in a really weird spot for me now. Chloe in the first game is a character I still very much despise, and I think it's clear to all of you to hell and back at this rate on why I think that is. But Before the Storm, Chloe is a character that, while still has some flaws, is an almost fully realized version of what I personally think the character should have been in the first place. And it's bizarre to have to make that clarification, right? I like this character in the prequel more than the original. How often does that happen? In the end, I don't really know what to make of this. I feel like we're living in some split dimension where Chloe is simultaneously a good and bad character at the same time. How I feel about the character as a whole will never truly go away considering the impact the first game had on me personally, but this game is now proof to me that given the right execution, this could have worked out so much better in the first game's favor. It's proof that I could have liked Chloe more as a character. Hell, it's proof to me of why people even liked Chloe to begin with before this prequel even came out. I'm jumping on this point a little bit early, but while I don't have a history with this game, I think playing it now, this is going to be one of those things I always am going to find oddly fascinating with this game. It's not necessarily the developer's passion, for the most part, or the very, very few things I do legitimately like about the game, but how in some ways it feels like its narrative existence is to show the potential that was missed. It was just presented in a way that unfortunately was never going to fully work out. Everything was stacked against Deck 9 in this area, but damn it, they tried anyways. They certainly tried harder than some other elements in this game, and I can respect it. Because for the first time, I can finally understand why people took a liking to Chloe Price. What I see in her here, in my first run anyways, is likely what people saw in her in the first game. This game is what happens when you make a genuine effort to improve a story after the fact. It's just unfortunate that since this is a prequel and not a sequel, so much of it doesn't or can't line up with what it leads to. Because Chloe's character regression is not the only issue with Before the Storm in this regard. But hey, in all fairness to Chloe, I may have all these complicated feelings about her. I'll at least give her one thing. She's not Rachel.
It is so much fun for me to play Rachel Amber. She is a chameleon, so there's so many different characteristics about her that I can play into. And it's such an experience that I can go from being this popular girl in drama who is like in charge of everything and loves what she does, to being real with Chloe and being who I am instead of what everybody sees me as.
Okay, let's talk about what might be the most controversial element of Before the Storm. Rachel Amber.
Let's get the hell out of here.
So I am obviously not a Life is Strange enjoyer, but based on what I've personally skimmed here, and I could be totally wrong on this, just because this is basically based on what I've personally just literally skimmed from Reddit posts, from video essays, from other posts and forums and whatnot, I kind of get the impression that Rachel is considered the worst part about this game based on what I've personally skimmed. I could be totally wrong on that, but based on what I've seen, that seems to be the impression that I get every time I look into anything about what fans think or what people think about Rachel. Like, the general sentiment I seem to get is that she's not a good character and that she's the reason Chloe is the way she is. And spoiler alert, I do think she sucks in this game too, but not always for the same reasons as I've noticed a lot of people bring up over the years. Like, in regards to her being a bad influence on Chloe, you can make Chloe act like that before she even meets Rachel. Let's be completely real here. Chloe's problems as a person as well as a character are not because of only Rachel. On top of that, let me reiterate again, this game takes place over 3 days. That's not enough time for anyone to be that much of a bad influence on anybody. And that argument goes for all of the other things I've seen people say about Rachel in other posts, essays, and whatnot. People wonder why this game never touched on Rachel's infidelity with Frank or how she likely only saw Chloe as a means to an end, or her relation to Jefferson. You gotta consider the game's timeline here. Rachel is 16 in Before the Storm. Frank was 29. Whatever they had going on probably didn't happen until close to Rachel disappearing, after she became an adult. Unless the game was going to cover events right before her disappearance, this was never going to be considered. Frank's an asshole, but one that both dontnod and Deck 9 want you to at least somewhat sympathize with. I don't think they always do a great job at it, but the intention is there. So I don't think it would be in Before the Storm's interest to have this love triangle conflict happen now, before Rachel is even a legal adult. This is also implied with Jefferson, seeing as how Rachel doesn't even meet him until right before she disappeared, if the first game is anything to go by, and Jefferson isn't here at Blackwell yet. Could you argue that's still a fault of the game for choosing to have it take place in this 3-day period specifically in 2010? Absolutely. But I do think these common criticisms are partially displaced because, you know, they're not accounting for when this game takes place. I don't think the game's timeline should have been like this, but this is what we're working with. As a matter of fact, I think the major problem isn't that Rachel is a really shitty character. I think the major problem is that she's barely a character at all. Think about how the first game presented Rachel. It was always through rose-tinted glasses. Everyone constantly talked about how great she was, how talented she was, how beloved she was. Life is Strange 1 presents you with this idea of a person, not the person themselves. As a plot device for the first Life is Strange, this works fine, especially when Max and Chloe are confronted with her more secretive side when she was alive. You get the idea that maybe Rachel wasn't all she was cracked up to be, that she only got this reputation after she disappeared, or at the very least, it was enunciated after she disappeared. So when a prequel comes out that focuses on establishing her as a character, that's pretty tricky. You have to move past that idea of a person and finally show everyone who she really was. And what does Deck 9 do? They stick to that like glue. In episode 1, when Chloe first meets with Rachel and talks with the other students the next day, everyone talks about her in the exact same way they would have in the first game. They talk about how talented she is, how great she is, how loved she is. Everyone wants to know her, everyone wants to get to know her, everyone is jealous of Chloe managing to get some quality time with her. And maybe they were trying to build her up to when Chloe meets her for real, but in the process, they're doing the exact same thing the first game already did. You could argue the entire game does that, recycling key ideas from the first game over but not as good, but it's at its most glaring here. And then you get to meet Rachel, and what is she like as a character? Hey man, your guess is as good as mine. Rachel Amber is so fucking boring, dude. So, what do we learn about her from this first episode? Well, she's a California girl. She's ambidextrous. She's a Leo. Oh man, I am so glad I own 3 copies of this game just so I can know all of that about Rachel. Before the Storm constantly leans into this idea of a person when it comes to Rachel. She's smart, she's outgoing, she's spontaneous, she seems to be good at everything, but that's such a basic, borderline understanding of a character. Like right off the bat, I can tell you about Max and Chloe as characters. Max is a shy, adorable girl who loves photography, is firm in her beliefs and what she stands for, she snoops and eavesdrops, she's pretty cringe but embraces it, she's a bit of an airhead, and I can immediately tell you moments where this shines through. The countless times she takes photos across Arcadia Bay, when she snoops around in Victoria's room, when she stands up to David or Nathan for being bullies, the countless times she's dumb with her time powers and could rewind key moments to avoid confrontations, that ready for the mosh pit shaka bra moment, those are all key moments about Max that immediately make her stick out to me as a character. Hell, this goes for Chloe too. She's a punk girl with an attitude and a mouth that doesn't know when to shut up. She's snappy, she's short-tempered, she's irresponsible. There's that moment where she blows up at Max for taking Kate's phone call. There's a truck argument where she yells at Max and her general life situation. That part in the junkyard where she shoots herself by accident because I have to find some way to shoehorn this bit into the video. You thought I wasn't going to talk about it again, did you? I mean, yeah, they're all in service of a character that I didn't like, but those are still moments that encapsulate who Chloe is for better and mostly for worse. Rachel doesn't really get any of that. Besides, I don't know, the play, there's never really a key moment that makes Rachel as a character stick out. I mean, what does her being ambidextrous and a Leo really tell me about her besides some fun trivia to add to her wiki page? There are parts of the game where I think they're trying to give her these key moments. One part that sort of stands out is that office visit in episode 2 where Rachel tries to take the blame for Chloe, and the game tries to present it like Rachel is this amazing actress that fully convinces everyone that she's fully at fault here, but it doesn't come across like Rachel being this incredible two-faced girl who can change personalities at any given moment. It comes across like a theater kid trying too hard. Which, given the character I think that they were intending, I guess it isn't that far-fetched, but that doesn't seem like it was the point here. It also doesn't help that for the most part, this is also not a great performance. Look, I'm sure Kylie Brown is a great person. I hope she got a lot out of playing this character, she learned a lot and was able to apply that experience for future roles she got. I really hope she's doing well in her career, and it seems like she really enjoyed playing Rachel and enjoys speaking to people within the community. But whether it be because of her, the voice direction, the game's script, or a combo of all three, this performance does not work for a character like Rachel. Rachel constantly sounds really stilted and bored in her delivery at worst, and at her best sounds pretty juvenile, which I think is a problem when you have a character that's intended to be like this master manipulator. I can never really get a real read on what Rachel is thinking of, not because she's this cunning, manipulative force the game wants you to believe she is, but because most of the time, I can't even tell what kind of force she's supposed to be. Because of this performance and Rachel not really receiving many key moments that define her individually, well, at least good moments, we still only have someone who is an idea of a character. Why is Rachel in the play? Because she's talented. Why does Rachel take the heat for Chloe? Because she's cunning. Why does Rachel start a forest fire? Because she's passionate. Her passion is like a fire that looks beautiful but destructive, and the game will never let you forget that analogy, so don't fucking forget it. There's no interesting sequence of actions or character traits that are in service of building Rachel's personality. Like one example, tell me why she's into theater and why she wants to be in that play. As much as I hate Chloe, I can at least understand why she is the way she is. Why is she occasionally snappy towards Max? Because Max left town 5 years ago and she feels bitter about it. There. Sometimes that's all you need. The only time Rachel really gets any of this is in relation to her parents and everything going on there. But this is never in service of building Rachel as a character, it's in service of building up to a plot that, quite frankly, didn't need to be this central. Or at the very least, couldn't be this central in this little amount of time. I mean, think about it. When you first heard Life is Strange was getting a prequel focused on Chloe and Rachel's relationship leading up to the events of the first game, was this soap opera level family drama about Rachel's dad really what you expected? Life is Strange was dramatic, sure, but I don't know, that? And all of it is so fucking basic too. None of this builds towards anything for Rachel. She has the response you expect from something like this, being mad at her dad for lying this whole time, but what does any of this say about Rachel herself? Does it make her reflect on the kind of person she is, how this connects back to any of her personality traits? No, it doesn't. Either because she doesn't have those traits or the game forgets to recognize them. Here's one golden opportunity I think they missed. Rachel's dad spends a lot of time being two-faced in this game, lying to Rachel about the real context behind her mother and why she came back so suddenly. Sounds a little like Rachel's secretive nature from the first game. Why weren't there any moments where Rachel reflects on this? Why doesn't she ever take a moment to acknowledge how similar she is to her father in this area? Give her that internal conflict of how she gets this personality from her father and what it might say about her. Maybe she has some doubts about what it says about her personally, and Chloe might choose to assure her that while her dad uses that talent for something this deceptive, Rachel has used it in a more positive light in some circumstances, like when she tried taking the blame for Chloe, even though I think most reasonable people will probably see past that, but whatever. What I'm trying to say is that there was a chance here for the game to make that comparison. Rachel has even acknowledged she's good at reading people and lying, probably thanks to her dad being a DA. And what we get instead is some bullshit Rachel spouts about the stars in the sky being from stars long dead. I think Shadow the Hedgehog said something like that, except, you know, the difference is that none of that in Before the Storm is done in service of making Rachel a better character, and the other is coming from Shadow the fucking Hedgehog.
The light shines, even though the star is gone.
Kind of weird how often I've been able to bring up Shadow the Hedgehog in these videos, don't you think? Like, look man, I can't help the fact that Shadow the Hedgehog outpaces every single character in the Life is Strange franchise, okay? That's just facts. There's no growth here when it comes to Rachel. The only thing that really changes by the end of the game is whether or not she hates her dad or hates her dad more. And was that really worth an entire game? Chloe does not progress or get better as a character in Life is Strange either, but at least there's a real personality there the game has to work with. Before the Storm is so caught up in romanticizing Rachel that it forgets to even make her a layered character in the process. I know as much about Rachel as I do the other characters by the end of the game. That's not how it's supposed to work. Rachel is the character I should know the most about besides Chloe by the end. This game doesn't present me with reasons I should like Rachel by the end of it, and in fact, it does the opposite of that, because when Rachel is bad, she's really fucking bad in this game. And this is, conveniently, like Chloe in a few key moments. The wine, the fire, and the play. There we go. Her key moments had to be in us hating her. This game's got its priorities straight. First up, stealing the wine. This game is not doing itself any favors by trying to turn this into a moment that's supposed to be funny.
This woman needs mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Stat.
No. This entire scene feels like a setup in a bad cartoon, with Rachel very clearly being perfectly fine when she fakes collapsing, this couple being the most oblivious fucking people on the planet, and Chloe badly convincing this guy in a humorous way to take charge of his own life and help Rachel himself. Like, it's already bad enough this whole scene comes across as awkward and dumb, but when you remember that this is a Life is Strange game and has set a precedent for wanting you to take it seriously, it falls on deaf ears when you have something that looks like it's coming out of a bad improv class and passing it off like this is simply how people act. People were over the top in Life is Strange 1, but at least there was an attempt at authenticity in that game. But okay, I'm getting off track here. There's no real build-up to Rachel doing something like this. She does it pretty spontaneously, which I guess fits what little character she does have, but remember, we've only known Rachel for a couple hours by this point. Even Chloe acknowledges the whiplash of her suddenly acting like this, and yeah, we do eventually find out why she acted out, but this is way too early for the game to be pulling something like this. Chloe in the first game at least had some time getting to ground her before we had that fight with her and David. There isn't anything here that would indicate to me that a girl from California who's ambidextrous and a Leo and makes offhand comments about wanting to leave a town and climb Mount Everest or some shit would pull something like this. Something that, big shocker, is never brought up again, and Rachel never deals with any kind of consequences for doing this. The closest we get to that is when Chloe eavesdrops on this couple later in the hospital. So, you know, a follow-up that doesn't even land on Rachel. You know what does land on Rachel? It's kind of wild to me, considering Rachel is a California girl and all, and considering the climate in Arcadia Bay, that Rachel would even consider playing with fire like this during a fire season. Yeah, I know the context, she's going through it right now, but Jesus, this alone goes above what most characters in these games have done so far. I mean, what better way to make a likable character than for her introductory episode to have her light the goddamn town on fire? And besides the whole fire is gorgeous but also destructive thing they beat over your head in this game multiple times, this is never really addressed again. At least to the degree it needs to. The most we really get is Chloe going, wow, Rachel started that. Damn, that's crazy. Like, no, let's not brush past that. She started a fucking forest fire. Why does this barely play a role in the story? Why are there no consequences for this besides contriving a way for Chloe to get shoehorned into the play? Ah, good lord. Speaking of that, do I really need to go into again how fucked up that whole ordeal is involving Victoria? Like, it's bad enough that the game treats this like it's some goofy, silly, haha thing, but once again, the game never dwells on the repercussions of this, let alone how the repercussions of this affect Rachel. If one of the points this game wanted to make was how Rachel was not always as she seemed and could harbor more sinister intentions, then it completely falters in making that point, because this whole sequence is played for laughs, let alone isn't brought up again. Does this game want me to take Rachel seriously or not? Do they want to treat this like it's a more serious thing and have the player, and by extension Chloe, start questioning Rachel's intentions? No, because they make this moment a punchline. Is it trying to expose how rose-tinted the player and by extension Chloe have gotten to Rachel's antics that they won't really question this? No, because when Victoria does it, or anyone else for that matter, the game treats it like it's a serious thing and you have to save Rachel. In addition to how seriously it's taken when Sarah gets drugged. Which is it? You cannot have your cake and eat it too here, especially when Rachel gets off scot-free no matter what happens in this part of the game. And I do know some people are going to say, this is the point. Rachel is not supposed to be a good person. She's supposed to be this bad influence for Chloe. But if you're going to do that, you need to at least reasonably acknowledge that. It shouldn't be through Chloe ignoring all of these red flags. It shouldn't be through a character like Elliot having a full-blown psychotic breakdown about it. You need to have more reasonable situations where the player is going to question this. And since Chloe's the player character, by extension, you need to have Chloe also once in a while question this as well. This is part of why this whole drugging incident is as bad as it is because Chloe never once addresses that or questions Rachel about why she would do something like that. And that could technically go the other way around too. Like if Victoria is the one that ends up drugging herself, Rachel could maybe question why Chloe would entice her to do that. Like, you need to be able to address these reasonably in context to the game before the Storm doesn't do that with Rachel in any capacity. And that's part of why I think she's so bland and boring. These are the closest to key moments Rachel gets besides getting stabbed. They never contribute to her growth, and more importantly, she never faces the ramifications of them. And I think this is a large part of why Rachel Amber is so damn bland in this game and why so many fans hate her. Besides the game pushing this idea of Rachel with the most basic, bare bones personality traits you can muster up for a central side character, none of these moments ever expand on the consequences of that. Chloe at least would get called out in the first game. Before the Storm never addresses the bad things Rachel does. There's no consequences that fall on her for stealing the wine, for starting the fire, for her drugging Victoria. Getting stabbed by Damon is the only time this happens, but one, she doesn't get anything out of this because she still wants to find her mom even after this. And two, this doesn't even contribute to her growing, it contributes to Chloe who's left to deal with the aftermath of bringing Rachel into that situation to begin with. This all affects the final decision of the game too. This game ending fails on so many levels because besides there being no level of cohesion to all of these choices, as I will get into later, they all revolve around a character that I truly, genuinely do not care about in the slightest. Rachel is a blank slate that at her best is about as surface level as the rest of the cast, and at her worst is a contradictory blemish against what this game and this franchise is supposed to stand for. It's hard for me to even be mad about this character in the same way I was about Chloe because, and I keep saying this a lot in this video, but I genuinely cannot believe I'm going to say this right now, at least Chloe was an actual character I can have feelings about. Rachel does nothing for me. She does nothing for me when she's supposedly this popular kid everyone loves. She does nothing for me when she starts the fire, doesn't face the consequences of that, and gets this weird scene that tries to imply she has powers too, but doesn't actually. I don't know what the fuck they were trying to do with this part. She does nothing for me when she drugs Victoria. The problems there go well beyond just Rachel. And she does nothing for me when the final choice in this narrative-driven game, where your actions are supposed to have consequences, simply dictates whether she doesn't like her dad or hates her dad. Not like Rachel's parents matter much to the first game anyways.
What about her parents? Are they looking for her? They're in denial. Max, I know she's missing.
Yeah, remember that little detail in the first game? I sure as hell did. Pretty contradictory to how her parents act here, don't you think? And I do want to talk a little bit about that because this is not the only inconsistency I found in this game, and there's gotta be more. Hang on, let's see here. Are there any more inconsistencies with Life is Strange before the Storm? Oh my god! Yeah, this page doesn't lie. There's a lot. Oh god, see here for the inconsistencies within the prequel itself? Oh man, we're in for a wild ride, aren't we? So this might be one of the few areas of this game that I might not have the most expertise on. So based on what I looked into, canon for Life is Strange seems to be in a weird gray area. I don't see this as much with True Colors and with Life is Strange 2, since they're in their own self-contained thing, but the original game, Before the Storm, Double Exposure, and even to a certain degree the comics, I know the canon for them is kind of in a gray area. People aren't really sure, at least based on what I personally looked into, what is canon and what isn't canon. For now, I want to focus on a couple of things I personally noticed in Before the Storm, and then give this wiki page a read to see any big problems. I don't necessarily want to talk about small details because, look, small mistakes can and will happen. They happened with the first game too. I don't think it's narrative breaking that Chloe's pirate hat in this game doesn't match with the one she wore in Max's photograph of them in the first game. It's impossible to pick up on really small details unless you have several people pointing it out and keeping track of it. When it can be narrative breaking is where issues start to arise. This happened with the first game, what with all the convoluted time travel bullshit that happens, especially in the final episode. It happens here too. One example, I mentioned earlier how in the first game, Chloe mentioned Rachel's parents don't seem to be too worried about finding their daughter, which, yeah, that's in complete contrast to what we have here. James acts criminally in order to keep full custody of Rachel from Sarah. You can't tell me he, or Rose for that matter, wouldn't be worried out of their minds when Rachel eventually does go missing, let alone for 6 months. Another detail I personally noticed is that Chloe interacts with Nathan. Let me bring back that asterisk I mentioned earlier when Chloe stands up for Nathan. The issue isn't with how Chloe interacts with Nathan, just that the interaction even exists. Chloe tells Max in the first game that she met Nathan in some bar. She tried to get money from him in order to help pay off Frank, which turned into Nathan drugging Chloe and trying to use her as one of his subjects for his photography with Jefferson. This is why that confrontation happens in the bathroom to begin with, so she can extort him under the pretense that she won't tell anyone about what happened. The implication there is that Chloe had never met Nathan in any capacity before that night. And before the storm, however, she meets him on more than one occasion. And what do you know? The wiki page even knows this too. This is the only thing that is considered too ambiguous to really say one way or another. But there's a whole page of stuff here, and if you will allow me just for a second, I want to read some of it for myself here and talk about it. I'll leave a link in the description below if you guys want to read into some of this, but let's talk about some highlights. Victoria is presented as a sophomore in Before the Storm. The first game introduces her as a student who came to Blackwell solely for Mark Jefferson's photography class. Jefferson is not in this game and therefore not at Blackwell yet, which contradicts why Victoria is here in the first place. Victoria's presence as a sophomore specifically is also called into question, as based on her age and her being a senior in the first game, she should be a freshman here. Warren is in a student photograph as a sophomore as well with Chloe. This implies Warren should at least know who Chloe is, but he doesn't based on his dialogue in the first game. David proposes to Joyce at the end of this game in May 2010. However, in one of the photo montages that happens when Max changes the past in the first game, there's a photo of the two of them married, followed by Chloe on her 16th birthday, implying they should be married already by the time Before the Storm starts. This photo also implies Chloe had been coloring her hair blue by her 16th birthday, but it's treated as something brand new in this game. We know this is her 16th birthday because this photo changes to and from Chloe getting a car on her 16th birthday in the Paralyzed timeline. The first game says that Frank got his dog Pompidou by saving him and a bunch of other dogs from a dogfighting ring. Before the Storm instead says that Pompidou was a gift from Damon. At first I was going to counterpoint that maybe this was how Frank saved these dogs in the first place, but then I remembered that this game doesn't even have any implications of a dogfighting ring related to Pompidou. Oh my god. Okay, this one's my favorite here. Chloe's dominant hand. So if you go onto this page here, there is an entire section involving Deck 9, Square Enix, and even dontnod about what Chloe's dominant hand is. I wish I was making this up, but this is kind of hilarious. Let's just get into this. So, get a load of this. Dontnod had publicly confirmed for a long time at this point that Chloe was left-handed. Pre-release footage that came out for Before the Storm at E3 2017 showed Chloe using her right hand instead of her left. Or at the very least, she was using her right hand as much as her left hand. Square and Deck 9 released a full-blown public statement insisting that they did their homework and went so far as to individually count how many times Chloe used her right hand versus her left hand across the entire first game to determine which one was dominant, and apparently had very long discussions with Square about which hand was Chloe's dominant hand. And at the very end here, state they only found out about Chloe being left-handed from a tweet the original director Mitchell cocked after they had already completed episode 1. Dude, this shit looks so ridiculous and looks so much like some YouTuber making a my response statement on Reddit that I had to do some digging and really confirm if this was the case, and just since there wasn't someone on the Life is Strange wiki that was fucking with me, I dug for like at least 2 hours, I think. Like I'm not even joking. I was in the trenches. I was going through Reddit. I was going through Steam. I was going through GameFAQs. I was going through every avenue possible to see if I could find. I need to prove that this was real. And sure enough, look what I found. I found some Reddit posts from the developers 8 years ago that said the exact same thing. Dude, I don't know what's funnier. That Chloe's dominant hand was such a hot button topic that they needed to address it in the first place, or the fact that Deck 9 doubled down and over-explained this the way they did, instead of simply going, oops, our bad. Like, All of this is about her dominant hand. This is even first world problems, dude. We're talking about Chloe's dominant hand. Come on now. Again, if you want to read the full page, I'll leave a link in the description. I'll also leave a link in my sources for where I found those forum posts on Reddit. The reason I bring this up is because for a game so determined on proving it wants to do the original game justice, there seemed to be quite a bit of crucial elements that were never considered in this game, and Deck 9's response to this was not always the most graceful if you ask me. Yes, some of these elements were pretty minor, so minor that I'd argue even mentioning them in such a large capacity is bordering on CinemaSin syndrome. It's not affecting my enjoyment of this game that a discolored rectangle on the wall is called a discolored square. Like, come on guys. But Life is Strange had a core design philosophy to it that made you look for small details throughout its narrative. The attention to detail may not have always been great, but it was still encouraged by design. It's natural for fans to do the same thing with this game. These aren't small mistakes or oversights, these are blemishes big enough that it brings the series' timeline events into question. And by apparently over-explaining and justifying these decisions, as Deck 9 was implied to have done based on reading this page and the research I did do, they're not doubling down on what a great job they did in researching the original game, they're doubling down on retconning the canon of this series after the second game. Not exactly a good look to your audience, whether that was the intention or not. It feels like Deck 9 got pretty insecure over fans noticing and pointing all of this out. On one hand, I have to emphasize again, some of these things are so minor, I'm not even sure why they even felt the need to explain themselves, but on the other hand, it's telling that they almost always had to have an explanation ready the moment someone would ask about it. Could some of that possibly from fans overanalyzing things that probably didn't need overanalyzing? It's possible, but I feel that Deck 9's response to this is part of why Before the Storm's inconsistencies get pointed out more than the other games, at least from what I've personally gathered. Every answer to them should be as simple as, oh, we didn't realize that or notice that, or we felt as though it would be a benefit or a detriment to the story to keep it this way or change this. Not a wall of text that reads like a dev saying, well, actually, we did our homework, we know what we're doing, we accounted for all of this, you should all trust us. And then they proceed to have Chloe still use her right hand in episode 2. This is a vastly different reaction to when dontnod realized they got certain details wrong when making the first game too. Hell, in their developer diaries and commentaries, they knew certain details didn't line up, but they went with them anyways because they felt it would benefit the narrative. Like, why does Max start back in the classroom when she discovers her powers and they work like this only this one time? Because they needed to have that hook to grab the player, as well as put them in a situation where they could properly explain and test out how the powers worked in gameplay. I doubt this was Deck 9's intention when they kept explaining and justifying these decisions, and I obviously can't claim to know what was going through their heads, but if you feel the need to justify and explain changes to the narrative this much to this degree, and the way that they're explained to fans is through Reddit threads you have to dig to find and not the game itself, that tells me as a player you aren't very confident in the story you wrote. It's okay to simply admit details may have been missed. It's okay to say maybe they wanted to change details to benefit Before the Storm's story. Chloe saying Hela is a perfect example. The original game's intent with this was no deeper than one of the writers was familiar with the word being a slang term in the northwestern United States. That's changed so that Chloe picks it up from Rachel. Different creative visions, that's all you have to emphasize. I don't need a detailed breakdown on how Deck 9 analyzed every single frame that Chloe used her hands and had extensive discussions with Square on what her dominant hand was. Just say that you missed the director's tweet about Chloe being left-handed and leave it at that. I know that sounds rich coming from some YouTuber making a review of this game that's probably going to be well over 2 hours long, but you don't see me writing a thesis on why all of you in the comments of my last video were wrong and the word Hela was not used outside of California, because I know what I'm talking about. I don't know, does any of this make sense? Like, am I losing the plot here too? I don't know, thinking about this series canon is a little too confusing. Let's just move on before my head blows up, okay? When I watched the few developer interviews on this game that existed, one of the things I heard get brought up over and over again was Deck 9's StoryForge tools.
We realized we needed to attract really talented people. But once we had the really talented people, we needed to remove all the technical barriers that would get in their way. And so we needed to build a technical platform that would allow these creators the freedom to go create something amazing. And so we focused for the first several years on a technical platform that we call StoryForge.
Based on what they described, it's essentially a toolkit that streamlines the entire process of script writing for a choice-driven game like this, while allowing the developers easier ways to process these story and script writing ideas into the game itself. I could be totally wrong on this, but here's how I personally follow it. One half of these tools is for the writers themselves. They'll write what they want the core story and dialogue to be, but when it comes time to make different dialogue options and full-blown decisions, there are programs in place that make it more manageable to track where these decisions are and how they connect with one another. Essentially making it simpler for writers to program, okay, here's what Chloe's reaction will be if she says this, or here's what Rachel will say if Chloe did this earlier. This in turn allows for a simpler process for developers to program and design the game. They have a better understanding of scenes, set pieces, camera angles and positions, facial expressions for characters, dialogue, stuff like that. It also allows them to easily see, based on the script, how they should be programming all of this. This sequence of events leads to Chloe being excited, another one leads to her being sad. I probably have no clue what I'm talking about or if I'm even using the right terminology. I'm definitely not a developer, but this is how I understand it. And I think Deck 9 deserves praise for this here. I think in this area, this might be, gameplay-wise, the best thing about Before the Storm. You guys know how I feel about these types of choice-driven games. I'm not here to drastically alter the narrative. I want to see how I can interact with a stationary narrative in different ways. One of the first game's faults was that it only did this sometimes, culminating in an ending that always made those decisions null and void. No impact was left on the world you left behind. This is one of the very few things I'd argue Before the Storm has over the first game, because thanks to this tool, I think Deck 9 had a better understanding of making player choices stick, and having your relationship with characters feel more dynamic in a way that they wouldn't have understood without developing this kit. That being said, where the choices in this game falter and feel like they don't have any real meaning is because of other factors in the game. For one, the game being 3 episodes long. I know I've said it several times now, and forewarning, you might hear me repeat myself a lot in this section in particular, but I really need to in order to emphasize these elements. While I truly do appreciate that Before the Storm attempts to have your choices and decisions have more personal meaning to the player rather than narrative meaning, there simply isn't enough content here for you to really feel the weight of any of your choices. One decision will have you either helping Rachel or letting her take the heat, the next will have you saving Drew from Damon or stepping back from him. Most of the cast being really uninteresting doesn't help either. There are moments I like, such as the interactions Chloe can have with Joyce. Again, that D&D session you can have. Pretty much everything involving Steph, Mikey, and Drew I really liked. But that's all they really are, brief moments. Which I think leads to the biggest problem with this game's choices and why they don't feel impactful, despite in principle being an improvement over the original game. There's just too many of them that are way too different. Having played True Colors and Double Exposure beforehand, and now this game, and seeing how Deck 9 started with this series, I've noticed a pattern that these narrative decisions have in their games. This StoryForge toolkit sounds awesome and probably allows for a ton of really great and cool story ideas, concepts, beats, etc. But in the writing process, they're usually just that. Ideas. I believe Deck 9 got a little too excited with what they created specifically for this series, because if you're really paying attention to the game from a gameplay design perspective, Before the Storm at times can feel like a tech demo for what this toolkit is capable of. I want you to imagine this for a second. You're in a writing room, you're discussing ideas on where your story can go next. And obviously, people are gonna have loads of different ideas on where things can go next. One person is gonna want to point out one thing on a couple side characters. One person is going to bring up an idea of, hey, maybe we should do this with our main characters. One person is going to bring up, let's do this with our villains. And someone else might say, oh, let's also do this with our villains. So, you know, an overflux of different ideas that are going to be brought to the table. But it's still part of the job to look through all those ideas, figure out what can we streamline, what's important, what can we cut out, what can we keep into the game, what is stuff that we can just make optional stuff in here. The problem is that Before the Storm took all of that and made all of it equally important. Before the Storm was marketed as a coming-of-age story about Chloe and Rachel, their relationship developing, and their hopes and dreams of eventually leaving town. It's also a game that has, let's see now, a subplot about a ruthless drug dealer in the city who runs his business with a man who happens to be Chloe's dealer, a subplot of a high school jock who bullies Nathan Prescott at the beginning of the game, but also happens to be selling drugs for said dealer, Chloe's relationship with her mother and her boyfriend, Chloe's relationship with this guy she's known since elementary school, Rachel's relationship with her parents and finding out the fallout with her birth mother and her father, said birth mother being a recovering drug addict, a play going on at school that is causing some off-screen tension between Rachel and Victoria, bad enough that Rachel can potentially drug her or the other way around, telling Rachel the truth about her birth mother or keeping it a secret from her. All of this and more is treated with equal importance. Do you see the problem here? This is at its worst in episode 3, as I talked briefly about earlier. Why is there a fight in the junkyard? So we can have an intense moment where Rachel gets stabbed. Why are Drew, Mikey, and Steph in the hospital? Because of the drug dealer Drew was working with. Who's the drug dealer? Oh yeah, that's one of Frank's old buddies. And apparently, one of his clients is this chick who's a recovering drug addict that also happens to be Rachel's mom. But Rachel's dad doesn't want her to meet her. So what if we had a scenario where he works with this drug dealer to get rid of her? Then we can have an intense moment where Chloe has to save them. Also, this ends in an off-screen fight between Frank and this dealer. Oh yeah, there's a history going on between them that we have to explore too. Remember when you bought this game thinking it was going to be a coming-of-age story about two teenage girls who form an unlikely relationship? Life is Strange 1 had its fair share of side stories and characters, but besides them showing up as prime decisions at the end of every episode, Life is Strange 1 kept all of this as side content that didn't really affect the main narrative. It was all optional. Dana's entire side arc with her failed pregnancy and the guys she's dating, getting closer to Victoria's friends and finding out more about them, talking to townsfolk and seeing how they talk about the strange things happening in Arcadia Bay, or just being shitty people in general. Hell, even everything with Kate, which becomes a crucial part of the game, finding out more about her and her personal life is all optional stuff. It can be a huge help later on when you have to get to the roof, but it's still optional. Life is Strange 1 did encourage you to look over all your surroundings, but it was never a necessity. I had a perfectly fine grasp on its story the first time. All that stuff I discovered when I replayed it for my video was extra stuff that only served to enhance the game. Life is Strange's focus was on Max and Chloe trying to find Rachel and figure out what was going on in Arcadia Bay. Everything else in the game was purely supplemental. It had nothing to do with this. How Life is Strange 1 handles decision making is not something I was very clearly a fan of, especially when you had all of these different decisions that the first game presented to you, and most of them didn't contribute to the narrative. In Before the Storm's case, they do contribute to the narrative, but I think that's the biggest problem with it, because Before the Storm, it does address this part of the game that I had an issue with in Life is Strange 1, but it is a very severe overcorrection from the first game. Before the Storm is what you get if Life is Strange required all of that. Its narrative feels bloated because, well, it is. Where Before the Storm falters is that all of this happens in rapid succession, and it's all considered important or at least connected in some way. It's like Life is Strange's main narrative was this single thread that happened to have a few loose ones that could lead to something unrelated happening, and you could discover and follow it at your own pace. Before the Storm's narrative isn't a thread, it's a fucking conspiracy board where all the dots connect to one another. There's too much going on here, and it's not like the first game where for the most part you don't have to interact with it. If you want to get the most out of Before the Storm and its story, it's mandatory to interact with. And that's why Rachel blends in with the rest of the cast to me at certain parts of the game, because she gets just as much time spent on her as she does with other side characters. And this all culminates in that final choice, telling Rachel the truth about her dad or hiding it from her, yada yada. Before the Storm's choices, just like the first game, lead to only two options. All of your choices before don't matter again. Nothing you do in this game plays a role in this final decision. In the game's defense, they at least give you an idea of what the world you leave behind is like after. It's all very surface level shit, but it's there. Points for minimal effort. And if Before the Storm was a self-contained thing, I'd probably leave it at that. There's just one teensy tiny itty bitty problem here. Can you guess it? You have an idea of what it might be? Just a little teeny tiny issue here. This is a prequel. I understand. This story's scope was always going to be limited no matter what they did. We know what happens to Rachel. So why was this game's core focus not on her? Why did we need to have this overabundance of subplots and side things going on and not have a simple coming-of-age story of Chloe and Rachel becoming friends and eventually partners? Yes, this ending does address the problem I had with the first game's ending, not leaving an impact on the world you leave behind. The issue this time, though, is I don't give a shit about the world I left behind. Why should I care about this surface level montage of characters I know I'm never going to see again? Why should I care about them bringing back the first game's characters besides fan service? And above all, why should I care about Rachel and her dilemma with her dad when the game has given me no reason to care about it? This is why you hear me constantly say in these videos that execution is everything, because I think some of these are good ideas, but none of them serve a streamlined and specific framework. It's why Before the Storm feels less like a narrative and more like a collection of events that happen. And if that was the point that Deck 9 wanted to make, then mission accomplished, I guess. But I still don't think it did a very good job at that when these characters aren't given enough time for us to connect with them. It makes the decisions by proxy have less meaning to them, significantly less so when the game is presented as being a story at its core about Chloe and Rachel and their relationship. I like what Chloe goes through when it comes to Steph, Mikey, and Drew, but none of this has anything to do with Rachel. They don't even directly directly interact with her once in this game. Come to think of it now, Rachel doesn't interact with a lot of characters in this game, and that probably would have helped her immensely if Chloe and Rachel were interacting with these characters and not just Chloe. Life is Strange 1 struggled to maintain balance between its main narrative and its world at times too, but I can still tell you directly what it's about. A girl comes back to her hometown and finds out she has time powers. Her and her best friend decide to use this to help them investigate the disappearance of their missing friend. There. That's the narrative thread keeping everything together. And sometimes that's all you need. All I can tell you about Before the Storm is that it's a prequel about Chloe, because telling you, oh, it's a game about Chloe and Rachel, and it's about their relationship, but there's this thing that happens with her parents, and her dad might be cheating on her mom, and there's this drug dealer that they come across and have a fight with, there's this play that Rachel is in, and it turns out that woman is Rachel's long-lost mother. Make it primarily about Chloe and Rachel. The majority of this game's decisions should have been solely focused on her and her relationship with Chloe if this was the route they wanted to go. If you want to have this plot of figuring out what's going on with Rachel's parents, you can still have that, but focus on it. That seems to be the narrative thread they were going for, but that's not one you can properly put together in 3 episodes as this game is shown, let alone when you have this many other things happening at the same time. If other stuff is going to be mandatory, have it be in service of developing their relationship instead of being totally separate. Have more of the cast directly interact with Chloe and Rachel. Not every single person has to interact with her, but have more of them interact. Have Steph, Mikey, and or Drew directly talk with Chloe and Rachel at the same time. Have more instances where Frank directly talks to Rachel as well as Chloe, especially since that'll be important in the first game for later on. There needed to be more characters talking to Rachel instead of about Rachel. And on that note of the cast, let's get into the game's cast of characters, at least best as I can. Chloe got the Queen's treatment again, Rachel got the Princess treatment. It's time for everyone else to get the Peasant treatment again. Let's talk about the new characters first, and then on to the returning ones. James. I don't know if there's more I can really add when it comes to James that I didn't already cover. He was clearly supposed to be one of the, villains in the game, but they don't give that enough time to really have any staying power. He's about as boring as a rich white guy gets. Rose. All I can add besides also being a boring rich white person is that there was something about Rose in episode 2 that really creeped me out more than most things in the series has so far. And clearly this was intentional to a degree, given how Chloe reacts to Rose not reading the room and playing their conversation completely straight. Just a change in music and this could easily pass as an early scene in a horror movie. I don't know, I can't explain why it unsettles me. Sarah. Something I've seen other videos point out is how Sarah looks and talks way too nice for someone who's recovering from a heroin addiction. And yeah, I can see that, but I don't know. The last game had Max fucking up time and space. I can suspend my disbelief at least a little bit here. Not much else to add. I love the conversation she has with Chloe towards the end of the game, and it's one of the more well-executed mature moments in the game. Steph. I really like Steph. She doesn't have a lot to do in this game specifically, but they really do a lot to set her up. She plays D&D, she's a theater kid who's a little crazy about putting post-it notes across the theater department, she's got a crush on Rachel, and that leads to Steph being one of the only characters Chloe truly talks to about her relationship with Rachel. Kind of a shame she isn't in this game more. It's pretty clear between all this and Deck 9 eventually bringing her back in true colors that she was a favorite, and they wanted to do a hell of a lot more with her in this game. Mikey. Mikey is also one of the better characters in this game. He's a bit of a nerd, he's really good at drawing, and although he's probably the least interesting of the three when it comes to him, Steph, and Drew, he's likable enough. The only other thing I have to say is that I find it hilarious that they gave him a shirt that says "Cool Story Bro," and it's not even designed in a cool way or anything, they just clearly slapped some text on a texture and called it a day. Drew. While I wish more characters had some depth and nuance, I'm glad Drew was one of the few to get this treatment. In episode 1, you think he's going to be this generic jock type that bullies other kids, but then episode 2 hits, and you find out how much pressure he's under. His family isn't in the greatest financial state, he's got a lot riding on a sports scholarship to help him make it, but he's also selling drugs on the side to help him with his current finances. When Damon comes and confronts him, his responses aren't totally black and white. I have the same feelings for Drew here that I did for Dana in the first game. He's probably my favorite side character in this game. My only real gripe is that since this is one of the subplots that gets lost in Before the Storm's bloat, this isn't delved into nearly as much. I would have loved even more for this to be an optional narrative that spanned across a full 5 episodes like Dana's side story did. But unfortunately, this is all we got. What we did get though, I really liked, and it's one of the game's highlights. Samantha. She's a bit of an awkward mess and takes a liking to Nathan. Aside from her scolding Chloe for not intervening during Drew and Nathan's fight, even though, you know, she was just as capable of doing that, I don't get much out of this character. Elliot. He doesn't get the build up to episode 3 that he needed to make that sequence stick the way it should have. I guess that's what he gets for being a nice guy. Mr. Keaton. He's just a theater teacher stereotype, like, cartoonishly so. Even by Life is Strange standards, this is the most unrealistic character in the series so far. And if you're watching this and think, hey, I did have a theater teacher that was exactly like this, then man, I am so sorry for you. Sean Prescott. I don't really know. I think this is the first time I have literally nothing to say about a character. Skip. I don't know. He's just a chill guy, I guess. Only notable things to me are when he has Chloe listen to his band and how angrily he quits his job if you fail his Backtalk session. Funny how failing a crucial game mechanic gives you a better reaction from him than succeeding at it. Damon. There's not much else I can add to Damon that I haven't already discussed. At best, he feels like a villain brought in just for the sake of having a villain, and at worst is really stupid, supposed to be this intimidating threat but having no real plan when it comes to his deal with James. Damon's crew. If I hadn't looked up these names on the game's wiki, I wouldn't have even known they had names. I don't know, Rodney's a bouncer that serves as a game tutorial and nothing else. Gerald sells shirts for 20 bucks. Sheldon and Peter act like tough guys but go harass a 16-year-old girl. There's literally nothing here. Although this has got to be one of the funniest line deliveries I've ever heard in a video game.
You spilled my beer, bitch!
The picnic couple. They don't even have names, they're just the picnic couple. God, at least the first game gave Luke a name. Okay, on to the returning cast of characters. Joyce. I appreciate that this game tries to give some more nuance to Joyce that she didn't have in the first game. I found her to be pretty boring in Life is Strange 1, but having a direct connection to Chloe already makes this an improvement over her in the original game. That said, as I mentioned before, she never really goes past the archetype that they put Joyce in. She has conversations with Chloe about how she's slipping away and that she simply wants her daughter back and for her and David to try and get along. You've seen all this before. I like how reactive she is towards Chloe depending on if your choices are more lax or more toxic, but she's only reactive in those situations in isolation. They don't really play any role in every subsequent interaction you have with Joyce. David. Half of David's character this time is just a walking PSA, constantly telling Chloe she needs to get her life together and that drugs and alcohol are bad for her. I mean, listen to this.
Drinking. Drug use. You need to shape up. Get your act together. And put someone else first for a damn change. Getting kicked out of school? That's what losers do. Like making sure that you are no longer abusing drugs or alcohol. We have to know that you are not abusing drugs.
I think I was more convinced to not take drugs from that Pac-Man skit than I was hearing David. The only moment David gets that really stood out to me is when he opens up to Chloe about losing one of his friends during his military deployment. No Joker memes, I really like this conversation, and I like how it made David retroactively a little more sympathetic. I wish more characters had moments like this. William. He's not really a character per se, but William's in this enough that I thought it was worth briefly discussing. He swings pretty wildly in this game from, again, beating you with a brick with the game's analogies of Rachel being like fire, but also allowing for more complex moments like when Chloe has that conversation about if her dad may not have been this perfect person she once envisioned him being. Victoria. I've said enough when it comes to her getting drugged. All I really have to add is that this text rampage she gives Chloe if you make certain decisions is really weird, like even for her. Nathan. It's certainly interesting to see this version of Nathan that's a little more reserved but still very clearly a kid with problems, but he's not really in the game enough for me to come to any other conclusions other than that. Principal Wells. Again, wild that he's such a pushover in the first episode when he's confronted by Chloe, but then has no problem getting in her face with suspension or expulsion the very next episode. I don't know, I hated his dialogue in the beginning of episode 2, there's not much here. Miss Grant. I'm gonna be real with you all, I forgot she was even in this game. Samuel.
Rachel Amber is a dragon made of diamonds. Usually I can see both what people want me to see and what they want to keep hidden. A great heart he has, with much love and no room for fear.
Bruh, I still don't know what they're trying to do with this character. Dana, Evan, Hayden, Juliet, Justin. I'm lumping all of these characters together because they're pretty much here for fans of the first team to go, oh my gosh, I clapped when I saw it! Evan gets that fixation on fire safety that lasts 2 conversations. Hayden says some Shakespeare. Juliet shows up once after the play sequence and then some text messages afterwards. I also forgot Justin was in this game. Dana got the worst of it though. My favorite side character in the first game, I think that much is clear, and she's been reduced to this bad gag right before the play. She has a funny reaction to Hayden's bad performance though, I guess I'll give her that. Frank. As far as returning characters go, Frank probably gets the best treatment here. There's a lot the game goes over that we already know in the first 2 episodes. The best thing it does, though, is in regards to his relationship with Damon. Do I think their business partnership and everything they go into here is great? Not necessarily, it could have used some work. But I like that they added some details like this about Frank we didn't know about before. He's a bit more loose in this game, taking more than a few opportunities to give Chloe time to pay her back and even helping her on a couple occasions. Frank's alright in this game. The only major issue is that I feel this falls sort of in line with the same issue as Chloe. Frank can be pretty threatening to Max and Chloe in the first game, and this game doesn't really give me that impression that Frank could be threatening to that degree, but it is a more believable transition than Chloe can potentially be at least. Max. She left Chloe on red. God, Chloe was suffering with mental and emotional issues that were beyond her teenage understanding, and here's Max going like, lol, bye.
The journey to partner with Square has been absolutely amazing. They saw our passion for the franchise, and they saw our technical capabilities.
Fans love these characters. They love this environment. They love the relationships, and we just want to bring you more of that.
I think if we love what we're working on, fans are going to love it too.
You know, nothing says a bad game is good than an even worse game. And unfortunately, after all of this time with researching playing this game, this is probably the best thing I can say about Before the Storm. Life is Strange 1 was not perfect. I thought it was far from it. But it was still made in a process that was incredibly passionate and authentic, and it's one that now, having looked more into it in relation to this game, I have a ton more respect for than I did already, because when you pit it against Before the Storm, it becomes even more apparent and clear how badly dontnod was trying to get it right. It may not have always stuck the landing, but goddammit, did it really try to, and with very limited resources as well. I don't doubt for a second that Deck 9 was equally as passionate. They talked up being huge fans of the first game, they developed an entire toolkit just so they can make this game, they had to find workarounds to creating the game in the middle of an actor's strike that could be serviceable to as many parties involved as possible. But what we have here just doesn't work. Life is Strange Before the Storm is a game that has a lot of really good narrative ideas, but is never able to find the footing needed to properly bring it together. I like the idea of making Chloe a more level-headed and likable character, but it's delivered in a way that completely compromises who she inherently is. I like the idea of introducing Rachel and getting more into her as a character, but they never move past this idealistic version of her to make her into a character we should care about. I like the idea of making your choices have more personal and characteristic implications instead of narrative ones, but the characters are never given the proper depth needed to make these choices feel meaningful. I like the idea of having more narrative threads happening around Chloe and Rachel, but making them a requirement to experience rather than a fun, optional thing causes the story to become bloated and unfocused. I like the idea of having better facial expressions and character movements, but the game's performances, regardless of who or what is ultimately at fault, mostly aren't good enough for me to appreciate these improvements when they're in service of performances that are at best okay. I like the idea of making the soundtrack a little more punk than the first game, but okay, actually, you know what? I have nothing to say here. This soundtrack is great. Go listen to it. I can see the passion here. I can see the love this team has for the first game. I can see they also desperately want to do justice not only to the first game, but to what the first game represents for so many people. And there are moments where that shines through. I like some of the side characters like Steph, Mikey, and Drew, even if they aren't given the time they need to develop. I like that they tried adding more depth to older characters like Frank. And most importantly, I truly appreciate how they managed to make a version of Chloe who, despite causing inconsistency in relation to the first game, can be sympathetic, can be relaxed, can be understanding, can be level-headed, can be mature, and can be introspective. All delivered in a way that the first game could never do, and in a way that made me finally understand after all these years why people adored this character, why she's so beloved, why she's widely considered by fans to be such an influential part of their lives, and one of the best parts of the entire series. What Deck 9 accomplished on that front, along with bordering on creating an entire engine simply because they were that excited about making a Life is Strange game, this is the kind of passion that draws me to this series. Despite all of its faults and ups and downs, Life is Strange Before the Storm is a game that exudes honesty that I don't really get from other video game franchises, even if I think it isn't good. But whether it be from bad delivery, bad execution, or just bad writing in general, Before the Storm feels like a husk of what the first game was meant to be. It tries to offer something new, but in the process and delivery, offers almost nothing we didn't already know. It doesn't expand on the things that people really wanted to see. The few times it does, there's not nearly enough of it. And at times has a complete disregard for why the audience even appreciated the first game to begin with. This franchise made a precedent to handle its serious topics with care and delicacy, but by the second game, we're already treating an unlikable character getting drugged as something that's supposed to be amusing. That's always going to be Before the Storm's biggest blemish, is that whole sequence. Like, I cannot emphasize enough how much I fucking hate that part of the game. This game may have been what made me finally understand and realize what it is about Chloe that makes people love her so much, but that's by means of her being a completely different character that happens to have the same traits on one half, and the other half simply being an enunciation of why I disliked her so much to begin with. Many people ask what the reason for this game's existence was besides holding people over until Life is Strange 2. And besides testing and showcasing the new and innovative tools Deck 9 came up with, I can't really think of a reason for that either. I can see what they try going for to justify its existence, but none of it comes together in a meaningful way. Those efforts to improve the choices and their consequences, the efforts they made to improve upon what I consider to be the worst fictional character ever made, that's what drew me to this game by its conclusion and kept me sticking around on the second playthrough. Kind of like the first game's sense of passion and creative process. There's pieces of something here, but they're just efforts and pieces. They could have justified this game's existence by making it a true character study and breakdown of Chloe and her direct relationship with Rachel. But in Deck 9's excitement to work on this game, to use these new toys they made, to make a story they felt worthy to the series canon, but in the process forget so much on keeping that canon consistent, I think they lost the plot. Quite literally. I think I am confident when putting this next to the other games I've played that I can say, unfortunately, this is easily the worst Life is Strange game. Even if you absolutely love Chloe, even from the few things I legitimately did enjoy in this game, I don't think there's enough here to really justify getting it. You're not going to get that much out of it that you didn't already from playing the first game. You can skip this one. So in conclusion, what have we learned here? This game is not good. This game is actually a lot better than I thought now that I've actually played the prequel, and it's not great. What else? I guess what came after is still kind of good. I mean, Nick Apostolides is Leon Kennedy in this, and Resident Evil 2, so I guess some good came out of that. Some good came out of what we had before. Shit, is Madagascar 2 gonna be Deck 9's best game? Okay, you know what? That's actually not something to be ashamed of, okay? This game's fucking awesome. There. That's your takeaway from this. Play Madagascar 2 on PlayStation 2, please.